Okay. Okay, so tell me again what?
So on your notes here,
Yeah?
first sheet is your education.
Oh,
And then this is your memo about his clubhouse. Got one here for you too, and there. It's the same thing.
okay. So, business of the month, who announces that?
It'll be on Kathy Allen. You'll have to really, that's gonna do it.
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay. All right. Welcome to the Dana Point City Council meeting of March 7th, 2017. And so we now reconvene our meeting. Pledge allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you would please remain standing for the invocation today is Pastor David Manson of Florida Church.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for all your gifts of life to us, especially the great mystery and blessing of living in this place and time. We pray your Spirit to give wisdom and guidance to the leadership of our city for the welfare of all your people. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Good evening, Mayor Lewis and members of the council. I am pleased to announce the business of the month for March 2017, the UPS store. Tonight, we're joined by the owners, Mike and Jane Lockett, and their family. In the early 90s, Mike and Jane found themselves working in a corporate world, working as a CFO and a district manager for Budget Rent-A-Car. By the mid-90s, Mike and Jane found their opportunity to leave the corporate world and find a new passion. As they were moving and shipping their belongings from Indianapolis to their original home in San Diego, they met a couple who owned mailboxes, etc., and they saw how happy they were doing that. Soon they were renting a home in Dana Point, but soon grew tired of commuting to their respective jobs, and they knew it was time for a change. Remembering back to when they had moved from Indianapolis and the couple they met at the mailboxes, etc., Mike and Jane thought that opening a franchise was the perfect option where they could own their own business. In May of 1999, they opened a mailboxes, etc. at their current location at 34145 Pacific Coast Highway in the Dana Point Lantern District. 5 years later, UPS bought mailboxes, etc., and so the store is known today as the UPS store. They specialize in packing and shipping unique, fragile, and large items. While known mostly for shipping, the UPS store offers a wide variety of services, such as digital printing, banners, high-speed document scanning, notary services, mailboxes, and much more. Like any business, the UPS store relies on its customers to keep it alive, so it is essential that Mike and his staff take customer service to the highest level. Everyone that walks through the door of the UPS store is greeted with a smile, making each and every visit personable and memorable. One of the most unique things about this UPS store for Mike and Jane is that their grandson was born right as they were opening the store, and he now attends Dana Hills High School and works at the store after school. The UPS store has also been recently remodeled, and Mike stresses that he would not have been able to have the remodel without the community, customers, friends, and family. Being part of the community is important to Mike and Jane as they live amongst their customers and in the community. The UPS store are members of the Chamber of Commerce, board members of the UPS Co-op, and attend the Dana West Business Networking Group and are very active with their Capo Calvary Church. Through talking with Mike, he stressed how much he loves his community. He loves his life, his wife, and his family. On behalf of the City Council, we would like to congratulate you for being selected as Business of the Month for March. We wish you many more years of continued success.
So Mike, Jane, come up. There you are. I knew you were here. I recognize the friendly face when I go in. Good. How are you doing? Hey, good to see you.
So many familiar faces.
I know. This guy took my passport photo a couple times. They actually turned out okay for passport. Hi, welcome. Hi, thank you. So we value you. You live. Your place is right near where I live, so you're very convenient. I had my post office box there, and it's true. Every time I walk in, there you are, friendly face.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. So we have a certificate here that we'd like to present to you in recognition. The UPS store, our featured Business of the Month for March 2017. A valued member of our business community.
Madam Mayor.
And I believe Rachel Johnson from the
I'm
I'm sorry.
That's okay, Rachel and I, we go by the same name. She's prettier than I am. Well, I just want to say, if you don't know Mike and his family, he's always walking by the chamber with his beautiful dog. He's always got a smile on his face. It's not just the fact that you do your normal stuff, but it's shredding, it's counseling. Every time I come in, you ask how things are going. It's just really a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for having us. You guys are truly what makes Dana Point special, and I'm thrilled that you guys got Business of the Month. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
Oh, it's official. I'm official now.
You are, you're official. Now when I come in.
That's right.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to ask Sarah Arce, Boys and Girls Club, Youth of the Year, to come up here. We would like to recognize you. Welcome, welcome. Very inspiring. Thank you. Very inspiring. So we would like to also invite up Executive Director James Littlejohn and the Board President Rob Redwitz.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, and guests here today. Got a special young lady here that attends Dana Hills High School. She's been with us for 11 years, and she has something that she would like to say to you guys today of why she was chosen as our Youth of the Year of the Boys and Girls Club.
Can I give my speech?
Yes.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. I will be competing for OC Youth of the Year this Friday, actually. So, I would just like to share my speech with you. Y no te dio vergüenza, meaning, and you weren't embarrassed. Those were the words my mother asked me when I told her that I had let my classmates know that she is a housekeeper. As we went around the classroom, my peers spoke on the high-paying jobs that their parents had. I did not understand why she believed I would be ashamed to let others know what she did in order to provide for her daughter. I am proud. I am proud of all the sacrifices and hardships that we have had to overcome in order for me to fulfill my dreams. Because of the late hours she worked, cleaning 2, sometimes 3 houses a day, there was only one place for me to go, the Boys and Girls Club. Hearing those words sounds a lot more like home now. It is the place where I was able to find my purpose in life. Growing up, I knew that my life at home was different than most of my peers. For me, my mom was the only familiar face in the audience for spelling bees, award ceremonies, and band concerts. Despite her constantly trying to cover up her disputes with my father and his addiction, things grew to the point where they could not be hidden any longer. The Boys and Girls Club was my escape. The more time I spent at the club, the more I began to get involved. Being in programs such as C-Tech, softball, Keystone, and Toastmasters have taught me valuable lessons on how to work well with others while making my voice be heard. I'm sorry. Dedicating myself to the Boys and Girls Club for the past 10 years has made me committed and has opened up many volunteer opportunities for me. 4 years ago, my first day at Keystone, I kept to myself and did as I was told. However, that did not last long. Every member made me feel accepted, and I was soon voicing my own opinion and grew very confident. Because of this, I ran for treasurer the following year. This year, I am serving as president. The Boys and Girls Club has actively prepared me for college and life. For as long as I can remember, my mom has reminded me that the only way to secure a bright future is to go to college. Being the first in my entire family to go to college, I hope to inspire my younger family members and the younger kids at the Boys and Girls Club. Throughout the years, I have looked up to many club members and have watched them leave for college. To know that I am now a role model for the younger kids is such an honor. I remember receiving my first college acceptance letter in December. There were 3 people I knew I had to tell immediately. Of course, my mom, the branch director, and the education director at the Boys and Girls Club. They have been my biggest supporters from the start. I've had a lot of people tell me I've accomplished so much on my own, but the truth is I could not have done any of it without the Boys and Girls Club. Thank you.
Sarah, it is truly, truly my pleasure to give you this certificate of recognition. You're very inspiring. I enjoyed your speech very much. And I would like to read this one. Usually I don't read them, but I think this one is special. Whereas Sarah Arce joined the Boys and Girls Clubs of Capistrano Valley 11 years ago as a 2nd grader. Whereas Sarah is now a senior at Dana Hills High School. Whereas as a young member, she'd had to deal with a difficult home life, and the club provided her with a safe haven. Thank you. Whereas taking advantage of the club's offerings, she has participated in a variety of activities that has shaped her life, including C-Tech, Power Hour, and the Keystone Leadership Club. And whereas Sarah credits the club for helping her graduate high school and for providing her countless opportunities that she otherwise would not have had, and whereas Sarah is waiting to hear back from several colleges, and I'm happy to say and proud of you to say, she has been accepted to attend San Francisco State University. So I now present you with the certificate of recognition, the congratulations of all of the members here of the city, the staff and the city council, and our best wishes, and we know we're going to be hearing great things about you.
Thank you.
Is it possible I can have the rest of the city council back for a photo, please,
on three. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. So on three. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
I do have some key staff here, since you're taking photos. Nicole, Erica, these are for the Never give me emojis.
So on three. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
Hold it, you got my wife. My wife and a great volunteer, all great support. Don't give me a moment.
Okay, so you know the drill, right? 1, 2, 3. One, two. One more time. 1, 2.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, just because you haven't gotten enough pictures yet. We would like to recognize the Boys and Girls Club of Capistrano Valley 25th anniversary. And we would like to present you. We would like to present you with a certificate in recognition of the Boys and Girls Club of Capistrano Valley 25th anniversary. Congratulations. And stories like that are very inspiring. And my kids were also a product of a Boys and Girls Club, so I'm a big supporter. So in recognition of the Boys and Girls Club of Capistrano Valley 25th anniversary, 1992 to 2017. Congratulations. You do great work.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Would you like to say?
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone here on the city. We really, on behalf of the board of directors, we really cherish the relationship we have with the city, and we truly appreciate the support that you have provided to us and continue to provide for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you again, City Council. When we ended 2016, we had 306 kids from Dana Point, residents of Dana Point that were members of the Boys and Girls Club. And as you can see through Sarah, there's a lot of kids that have been affected by our organization and by your financial support that you have given us currently and in the past. And we hope that that continues. And thank you again to all of the volunteers out here, my wife and my staff that's here today. You see what the end product is. It's a Sarah Arce. So thank you on behalf of the Boys and Girls Club of Capistrano Valley. Again, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, wait, we need some more pictures. Anybody you want to invite up? Okay, now the fun part's over. Now we're at the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council, the public, or the staff specifically request an item or items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Are there any items to be removed by the staff?
No, ma'am.
How about the public?
No, Madam Mayor.
Any member of the council? So then, having
I'll move
none.
the calendar.
I'm sorry?
I'll move the calendar.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Very good. The consent calendar has been passed 5-0. Madam Clerk, if you would at this time read any titles or ordinances listed on the agenda? Sorry.
I forgot about that, didn't I? Actually, we have no ordinance titles to read this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And public comments? Thank you very much. Okay, so there's a 3-minute time limit for the public comments per person. Overall time limit of 15 minutes for the public comment portion of the agenda. The balance of the public comments, if there are any, will be heard after the new business portion of the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the City Council and not to consist, please, of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during the comments. Likewise, the council will respect you as well. State law prohibits the City Council from taking action on a specific item unless it appears on our agenda and that agenda has been posted. The City Clerk will distribute any handouts that you may have and give them to us. Before you speak, I would ask that you please state your name and your residence for the record. First person is Seema Aziz. Hope I pronounced that right? Good. After that, Penny Maynard, and then, oh boy, Hoyen? Yes. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for taking the time to listen.
If you could just state your name and place of
Seema
residence.
Aziz, and I live 33762 Orilla Road in Dana Point.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about the short-term rental permits. I've been doing some research on it, and I wasn't present when you guys held the meetings back in November and December, late last year, when you imposed the ban on new permits being allowed. And I've read, sort of both sides and why it happened. My concern is that unless you were a short-term permit holder, you really weren't clued in as to what was going on and that this ban was happening. So I think there's a little bit of inequity and unfairness with other people who may have wanted a permit and didn't, and there wasn't a window offered to those folks, like myself, who I had planned this summer to do some things, but not knowing that that was going to be terminated or that opportunity was going to be terminated, I'm at a disadvantage at this point. So I would ask that maybe there's a window where you allow people to get a permit, or there could have been a window that you would have allowed that, just to make it fair, because at this point, people who have permits are an advantage over people who never got a chance to get one, to make the playing field fair. There's a bunch of reasons listed in my handout as to why I think that permits should be allowed, short-term rental, and we don't need to go into that given the time. And I know you've probably heard every side 80 million times, so no need for me to repeat all of that. The other part is because there wasn't notice and because the permits aren't available, I love living in Dana Point, and I've done so for 7 years. I've been a homeowner, and I love living here. But there are opportunities that come up where I would like to move. And the only way I can do that is to be able to make it work financially. And short-term rentals obviously offer that, that ability. So that said, I'm in that point right now where I can move or probably should move, but not knowing what is in store. I know you guys are researching and thinking and going through a bunch of things, which I think is the right thing to do. But we have no concept of when you're going to make a decision, how long we should wait, where you're leaning toward, et cetera. And so having that kind of transparency would help people make decisions. Like, should I wait 6 months? Is this going to happen in a year? Should I sell my house? Should I hold on because maybe the permits will be allowed again? Not sure. But people have decisions to make and lives to lead. And so I feel like we're in a holding pattern right now. And so if there's any kind of guidance you can give or transparency, that would be appreciated. So.
Thank you, and we do appreciate your comments and your position. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Maynard. I was worried about you. We didn't see you last week.
I've been sick. I had the
Oh.
flu,
Okay,
and this is my first day out.
well, welcome back.
So I'm being careful not to breathe on people.
Thank you.
No, Tom Brady is perfect. So let's not talk about that. Okay, I want to say that your
Excuse me,
select...
I'm sorry.
Penny Maynard,
Thank you.
Dana Point, up the street, 2 blocks, walking distance, 21 years. I want to say the business of the month, the UPS store and Mike Lockett is the best selection. After I'd been the executive at the Dana Point Chamber of Commerce for about 3 years, Mike opened his store in PCH. I don't think he became a member of the chamber immediately, but eventually he did, and he did our services for years. As to what Heather said, he can do things in addition to what you think. He can do anything. And he's added a lot more services, and he can do them in a timely manner, reasonable cost. And I would recommend Mike Lockett and his team, his friendly team, and that huge dog, bigger than I am, when it stands up on hind legs. But he is wonderful. Okay, I'm here to say that I am writing an essay for a national publication about the 2016 election here in Dana Point that includes the June primary and measures H&I through November and its aftermath. I take a lot of notes. I write on calendars when I get home if anything significant has happened. I'll be writing about the consequences, both political and on the impact on the various ongoing projects, and will be writing from my perspective, my observations, and from published information. And I'll include cases when it comes to the H&I where there have been similar election results, including an article I read from Boulder, Colorado, which I discussed a bit with Matt, the editor of the DP Times. And if anyone has anything they'd like to contribute, my contact information is on the city's website under my campaign reporting information. And I would love to hear if anyone has any comments or would want to be quoted. Otherwise, I will respect and just do everything from my perspective. In my opinion, and of course, since I was involved in the election, I'll have a really good perspective on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Hoyen? Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Hoi Yang. I live in Dana Point. I've been here for years. I've never been part of anything. Now I want to be part of something. So I got on the city's website, and there's a page. It says, "Show your love, Dana Point," and tell us how to be a zero hero, zero waste. I thought it was awesome. It says, "Fast food equal to fast leader," and it says, "Become an active ambassador for clean and green places throughout Dana Point." I like that. So I heard in Newport Beach, the community is really active in cleaning up the trash in their water in the bay. And then I heard the Water Board of California last year had a new policy on 10% less trash per year and has a 10-year mark. So what is our city doing? I mean, we have a creek too, inland trash going to our water too, I guess. So I want to be part of it. I mean, I don't mind picking up trash somewhere or whatever city is doing, I want to be part of it. I brought a printout just in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Second thing is, lately, actually since last year, I read in the news there's a lot of talk about carbon tax, particularly this year. So I was so excited to read about that because years ago I came to my own conclusion, if there's a cigarette tax, there should be carbon tax because they're all polluters, right? So this kind of ties in with the trash, you know. Saturday I was walking from Blue Lantern to Crown Valley. I just wanted to walk to fall in love with my city for another day. And it's so sad. There was like so much plastic trash in the park along the walkway. I mean, otherwise it's beautiful. Otherwise, I really want to brag about it. So anyway, talking about this carbon tax, as I understand, some of the cities, even not far, like Encinitas is doing, the city council is having a meeting, try to endorse this thing this month. So I also want to know if our city is planning to do something like that. I also want to be part of that if I can. Brought a printout for that too. Can I give this to somebody? Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I love your enthusiasm. Did you leave a name and a contact number with staff? Okay, great. Thank you. Are there?
Having worked in clean tech for lots of years, I have a great deal of empathy for that. So maybe we can find some ways to do things here too. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm happy to be here.
Great, thank you. We're always looking for volunteers. Yes.
Mrs. Eves, I just want to let you know on short-term rentals, when we put together that ordinance, it's still going to have to go to Coastal Commission for approval because half our city's in the coastal zone. So it's really out of our hands on how long that's going to take once they get it. The last time would it take 18 months? And so you're looking at a minimum of 18 months once they get it, probably.
What about the properties that are not under the Coastal Commission, like on this side of the line?
I'm sorry we can't discuss it right now because it's not on our agenda. I just wanted to let you know on a timeline that's something you could be looking at.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Are there any other public comments?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so closing the public hearing portion. Any unfinished business?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so new business. Item number 8, resolution to amend the purpose and procedures of the city's Financial Review Committee. Recommended action that the City Council approve and adopt this resolution entitled, "A Resolution of the City Council of the City of Dana Point, California, amending the purpose and procedures of the city's Financial Review Committee." Is there a staff report on that?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Back at our City Council meeting on January 17th, the City Council tasked staff and the City Attorney with drafting a resolution to amend the existing Financial Review Committee procedures and mission, including 5 specific items on that January 17th agenda that was passed on a 5-0 vote, would be to establish it as a standing committee, that there be 5 members who live in Dana Point, that those 5 members serve at the pleasure of the City Council member that appoints them, and for the same term that the council member is in office. Each council member will appoint an individual. The committee would meet once per month unless 4/5 of the members agree to meet less frequently, and that the committee would report back to the City Council after every meeting. So that was on January 17th, we were given that direction. On February 7th, staff did bring back a resolution that the city council did discuss at length. The city council then directed staff to meet with the newly seated Financial Review Committee members to get that committee's input on the resolution. We had the first meeting of the Financial Review Committee on February 27th. And at the outset of discussing this item that was on that agenda, committee member Nelson produced a new document that was separate from the resolution that staff had presented back on February 7th, but that had been referred to the Financial Review Committee. There were extensive discussions that did take place by the committee covering a whole range of topics regarding their procedures and mission. And included in the report tonight is their overall recommendation, and I'm just going to give you the highlights. I'm not going to read the whole report. It's broken in. It does have a description of the mission, and it talks about the scope of work for the committee would involve fiscal and financial advice, and then there's some additional language that better defines that. It would cover looking at financial reports, including the budget and budget adjustments, interim unaudited financial reports, the audited financial reports, and also any legally required financial filings. Within scope of work also, they would be tasked with looking to make recommendation to the council regarding financial policies that include but are not limited to budget, financial reserves, the city's investment policy, and also its debt policies. Also, there's a little description in their scope of work regarding transparency and involvement with the auditors. It goes further to define some rules, if you will, or some desires for their access and any limitations to financial information. And then it also goes into their recommendations go into the construct, if you will, of the organization itself regarding the 5 members, how long one might be seated as a chair or vice chair, and so on and so forth. So from that, so we've got the report here, and what we believe we've captured the Financial Review Committee's recommendation to the City Council. That includes all of their input. We do have the vice chair, the chair, and one of the committee members here. I think I counted 3 so far. And we're available to answer any questions, and I'm sure the committee members wouldn't mind chiming in if you got questions for them as well.
Thank you. I just have a couple clarifications when you were talking about the information that they have access to. I'm looking at item 8, page 9, number 3, that they're authorized, the FRC is authorized to review all city financial and operational information, policies, and procedures unless the information is protected for reasons of legal confidentiality. That's your understanding?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The other question I wanted to make sure I understood is that in speaking with you earlier, that this committee does not have authorization. It's basically investigation and making recommendations. And so therefore, if there is even one member of the committee meeting at the appointed time, it would be called a workshop. It would be public, but that person could go ahead and meet. Is that correct? And then there would be minutes of that.
My understanding is you could also always have a meeting. If you're going to have a quorum of a committee, it has to be a publicly noticed meeting, and you have to have a quorum show up and participate in the discussions. And when there's an officially noticed meeting like that, the results of that meeting would be reflected in minutes. If you're just having a meeting, I wouldn't anticipate there being even minutes taken. I'm not saying people couldn't take notes, but there's no minutes, because the way the system works, and our attorney here can likely chime in a little bit more detail, but if a committee meets and there's a quorum and they make a decision as a group, then those actions are reflected in minutes that are put in draft form by staff that's supporting the committee, and they're actually brought back to the committee for review and agreement on them. And the way the city's committees works is once there's an agreement on those minutes, those are subsequently put on a city council agenda as a receive and file item to notify the council and the public of what the actions were by the committee. So it's a long-winded answer. I think I covered it, though.
Well, let me chime in, just to make sure we're clear on this. This is a Brown Act committee. So it can only meet and take action at a noticed, properly noticed meeting. If you don't have a quorum, then there's not a meeting. It's not an official meeting. The committee can't take action if there isn't a quorum. It's like the city council. It takes 3 of you to take an official action. So it's no different than that. I'm not sure if that clarifies or not, but that so there would not be minutes, to be specific to your one question, if there's not a quorum. There would not be any authority to do anything. Individual members don't have the authority to go off and do anything. It's the committee that would be making recommendation and providing advice to the council.
Okay, so if one of the, is there an ability for a committee member to make recommendations, let's say from a minority position, from the, if 3 members of that committee felt a recommendation was appropriate, but other members had other recommendations. Since this is not a committee that has authority to do anything other than make recommendations, could that person come and make recommendations as well?
Well, when the committee meets,
yes,
we'll have a discussion. If there's 2 different ideas on a topic, and you have a 3-2 vote on it or a 4-1 vote on it, the recommendation of the committee will be what the majority vote was, but that doesn't mean that the minutes wouldn't reflect what the person or persons in the minority vote had to say.
And would that person or persons in the minority have the ability to come and report to us as well?
Well, I mean, I suppose anybody can come and report to you. I don't know that that was I don't know what the council's expectation is on this. We don't have reports from the Planning Commission. We don't have reports from the Youth Board. How much time does the council expect to get from its committee members? If you want to start something new and different and give direction that you want people showing up and reporting, we could have, certainly all 5 committee members could come and give reports on things if they wanted to during public comment. The council could put something on the agenda where they want to hear reports. I mean, that's how much time do you want to invest in this, I guess is the question. I mean, typically on any sort of a advisory group like this, whether it's Planning Commission or, Traffic Commission or Arts Commission, what you get are the minutes. We actually had a discussion on this topic to some degree at the FRC's meeting where we talked about after certain more significant actions occur, then there might be a desire for them to come and present a report on, some completed, task that they had engaged in. But generally, the thought was that minutes would be presented, and that way the council would keep track of what's going on. That's more or less how this document is structured to reflect that.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure, because from my point of view, this is the purpose of it for me is to investigate and to bring suggestions and recommendations, and I just want to make sure that there is the ability to do that by members of this committee. And there would be.
I guess I'm a little unclear on what you're saying when you say that. Individual members don't have we're not giving badges to individual members to go off and, walk up to the door and say, okay, I'm here to investigate. That's not what a committee does.
No.
And I don't think that's what you're implying, but
No.
I'm a little concerned that, there's this investigatory sort of function you're now alluding to has me scratching my head a little bit. The committee, as a group, can say, okay, staff, we're interested in investigating or looking into, or whatever word you want to use,
sure.
How the money was spent on some budget item. I'm trying to make up an example. So what would normally happen is then that information would be brought back for all the committee members, so they would all have the information. They would digest it, talk about it at their committee meetings. Same thing as on a planning commission item. If somebody said we wanted a better understanding of what the form-based code is, we would do that kind of a presentation for them.
Okay, well, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Are there any other questions of staff? Yes, Mr. Wyatt?
So I'm super excited that the committee's formed up and get rolling, so I can't wait to, get going. So I don't want to try to solve a problem that doesn't exist in terms of getting it moving, because we'll figure out what works and doesn't work as, you know, the committee meets, I think, and so we can get it run. So I'm excited about getting going and starting to look at things and getting data together, and we'll see how it works. I think it's just exciting that we've made one step, and if it isn't perfect, you know, I think we'll take the opportunity to look at it. I mean, ultimately, of course, my view is I want to rely on them to look at things that I might miss, especially things, trend lines that are coming out and things. Because, for example, in today's council book, we have 3 financial sections in there. We have claims and demands that, you know, looked at, well, because I usually look at them and try to trend them. After a while, you know, the amount of different things I can look at get very. We have the monthly financial activity report for January coming in, and then we have the half fiscal year financial report and adjustments. And so I'm looking into saying, okay, so where were we half year at 18 months into our budget? What does January do to adjust it? What can I see in claims and demands for February that might give me something? So having more eyes and ears looking, following through on things. So I'm excited to get it started and going. So I would like to move that we adopt as the proposal here in our book and get this committee up and running. I guess my proposal is to I make a motion that we take the action requested here. So.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is there's a motion on the table that the council approve and adopt the resolution that is entitled, "The Resolution of the City Council of the City of Dana Point, California, amending the purpose and procedures of the city's Financial Review Committee," and that purpose and procedures is attachment A, correct?
I just have a question. Is there any,
Mr.
should we
Tomlinson?
consider any public comment on this item yet? Is there any?
I think there was no public comment.
Okay, thanks.
Is there a second on that? I will second that. Any debate? Hearing no debate, and let's vote. Okay, that's what I was calling for. Okay, Mr. Miller.
Sorry. I was waiting to hear what some of the other council members had to say about this, but I've got some big concerns. And the biggest one being, at our last meeting, I made the point to say, we need to set some ground rules for this committee. And I got a lot of pushback from the mayor. And she said, no, they're the experts, we're not the experts, it needs to be up to them what this committee does. I'm like, okay, let's let them talk, let's let them get together. Well, the following Thursday, I get an article in the Dana Point Times by the mayor having a question and answer that seems to lay out exactly what this committee is supposed to be doing before they've even met. And so, I look at that and I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure why you felt you need to go on record stating this is what this committee is going to do. And then the committee meets, and Ms. Nelson stands up. She goes, well, I have this document, and I've watched the video of this, that the mayor and I worked on that set up the guidelines. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. We had this conversation at the dais. They're the experts, not us. You didn't want us to have that conversation and set those, but you're quite obviously setting up your own guidelines. And then the very next thing I see is Ms. Nelson saying, oh, by the way, I just got a text or an email from the mayor. And you're emailing an active sitting commissioner during their meeting and having a discussion about policy. And I'm not sure where that falls in Brown Act or ethics. I know in our ethics training, which I know you just had, we discussed that specifically about communication with members at the dais during their meetings. And that really falls into a gray area. And I'm a little concerned that, instead of allowing the 5 of us who are ultimately going to have to make the decision on how this committee responds or how they act, And when it was brought up at the dais, you shot it down, but then quite actively got involved in this. I'm concerned about what's going on here. And to actually just say, I want to adopt this right off the bat without any discussion, it's, there's a lot of things in here that I want to talk about. But I wanted to put that on record right away that, there are 5 people up here making this, who are going to make this decision. You can't unilaterally shut us down and then go out. And if no other reason, it's not transparent at all. We tried to make it transparent up here and got shot down, and then it seems like behind the scenes you had some conversations on exactly what you wanted this committee to do. I find that troubling. I think we need to have a lot of discussion about what's in here. There's a lot of things in here that just quite frankly are bad policy. And I want to hear some other comments from my fellow council people before we get into this. But I'm very, very concerned about how this whole thing is playing out.
Okay, well, since this is directed at me, I will respond to that. I'm not sure where to start addressing those inaccuracies. Your feeling that you were shot down, we're all adults here. We all have our time to speak. I have my right to an opinion that these are the experts and that we were arguing about, well, let me step back. On 117, you, along with the other members of this committee, unanimously supported all of the items that I stated in my motion. And it was at the very next meeting when the resolution was brought here that stated only those items that you had already agreed to, that I said, after a half an hour, I think, of discussion and then the attorney saying we don't need the resolution, then why don't we let the experts who are the committee itself determine the basis for them to say how they need to carry out their work. But that doesn't mean that I don't have the right to say what I am envisioning, since this is actually the committee that I started, not you. And I had a vision, and I have my right to speak to the members of the public, and that is exactly what I did in my article. And I was asked for my input of what were you thinking when you started this. Now, if you feel you're shot down, here is your chance. You had your chance on the first. You had your chance on the meeting right after that. So, have at it.
First of all, you did not start this committee. These 5 members started this committee. You do not have the right to just unilaterally say, I'm starting a financial review committee. You said I think this is a good idea. We agreed with you in principle to create this committee. That night is what we were agreeing to. When it came back, that's when we were going to hash out what this committee is going to do. I actually said, I was looking at your resolution, I'm like, there are parts of this I don't agree with.
Which time was that? The first time or the second time? Okay.
The second time. We all agreed the Financial Review Committee was a good idea, but make no mistake, you didn't start it. This council started that. Okay? There wasn't even a debate about it. You said we all thought, hey, this is a great idea. It was your idea to do it. Fine, I'll give you that. When we came back, that's when the debate was going to be had about what this committee's role was going to be. And you said, well, wait a minute. We're not the experts. They're the experts. Allow them to do that. We're like, okay, so we hands off, let them bring back what they want to do. But in the meantime, you jump right in the middle of it and create this whole policy. And we're like, well, wait, this is not what we agreed to. We were supposed to allow them to have their meeting and bring back their ideas to us, not impose our ideas on them. That's my concern about what happened. You said, we are not the experts. They are the experts. Let them bring it back to us. I said, great, let's do that.
Which they have done. And
With
so
your
that's what we're
guidance.
voting on today.
With your guidance.
Well,
Okay?
that's what they have
And so
done.
I think, and especially emailing at the dais, I mean, that's,
Who is emailing? Where are you even getting this information? Emailing at the dais?
Miss Nelson.
I'm sorry, that is just
Miss
incorrect.
Nelson, and it's in the recording, it's in the minutes, it's actually reflected in the minutes, sat at the dais and said, oh my God, the mayor just emailed me and this is what she would like to see. Okay, she was sitting at the dais during the meeting while that happened. Okay, so if you would like us to pull it up, I'll have staff pull that video up, and talk, we can talk about that. I mean, that's not what this is about, but that was my concern. Okay, it seems like there's a lot of unilateral decision-making being done. There are 5 people that vote up here. We all have the same amount of votes. We have 1. There's no more weight to anybody's vote than anybody else's. So I want to have a discussion on this. I wanted to bring it up. That was my concern. You have a right to respond to it. But those things did happen. It's accurate. We can pull the minutes and look at all that if
I
you'd
have
like
no
to.
problem with what happened.
And so that was my point. But I'd like to hear from the other council members about this resolution. And I know there's some committee members out there that are going to want to speak as well. So I'm going to stop talking. I want to hear from the other council members about this.
Do you feel you've had your full say?
No, I've got a lot more to say about that.
I don't want to shoot you down here.
But we are going to talk about some of the policy, some of the things in this policy.
Very good. Anybody else have anything to say?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm looking at attachment A, which is on page 8, to the resolution, which I believe is sort of the, I don't know what the proper word is, the nuts and bolts, or basically what we're being recommended to do with this committee. And of course, I mean, I think it was kind of implicit in what was being said. I mean, the committee does what we decide it does, and that's what we're here to do. And obviously, last time, I think it was correctly stated, and I seem to recall saying, I came to that last meeting with an expectation we were going to hammer out some of these details. So I'm glad we have a chance to mark this up. You know, I was looking for something, at least a starting point. But I will say there are, you know, looking at this, it just is so broad in the scope of work that I'm really, it does a little bit more, or could be construed at least, to do more than I expected this committee would be doing. When it was proposed, the Financial Review Committee was responsible for what was in our Statement of Safekeeping and Investment of Public Funds document, which is basically safeguarding our funds, number one. Number two, making sure we have enough liquidity. And number three, perhaps making some kind of return on investment, if they could, in the third or the lowest goal. And those are the recommendations that they would make to us about our investment policies. And that's good. And I understood the purpose of the motion was to create a watchdog committee, which I supported. I do support. I think we should have a watchdog committee in how our funds are spent. And so I sort of expected something to come back talking about, you know, the role of the watchdog committee, how they're going to carry it out. Some of the specifics that I was talking about, you know, there's some questions that I have that are, you know, that are unanswered. You know, I think about in performing their role as a watchdog committee, you know, I read this, they should have access to our financial documents. Try to think of an example. You know, if a contract is awarded, you know, it's important to know who the contract was awarded to. If there were bids received, they should have the ability to review those bids after they're opened and see who the contractors were. You know, was there anything going on in the awarding of the contract that should not have been going on? In other words, the purpose of a watchdog committee is really looking for fraud, waste, and abuse and corruption. You know, that's the purpose of a watchdog committee. So really what that brings to my mind is they're looking at the decisions we made. If we authorize a project and then appropriate the money for it, you know, what we're looking at in a watchdog committee is
one, was was everything done in accordance with the law, with our codes? Was it awarded correctly? They can see if there was anything that was not done properly in the way the city is spending its money. And then they can also look at if the money is being spent in a way, I think of the federal government, we probably all remember the story, I don't know how old it is, but I think it was the $600 hammer or something like that, where after you do the audit of how the money's actually being spent to see if it is being spent in a wasteful way. That would be under waste. So I'm looking at the documents that's come back to us, and I'm interested in having this discussion tonight because I think we definitely need to mark this up, if not, really revise it. When it talks about having access to the documents, I mean, I think we need to clarify what does that mean. It was sort of alluded to. It's the committee that is looking for access to the documents. So we want to be clear that this isn't just any one individual on the committee can come in and demand to see certain documents. This is the committee acting. If the committee meets, sets on their agenda, there seems to be something wrong with the awarding of a certain contract. And I think we should look into it. And they decide that's what we want to do, then they can vote to do that. And as a committee, they can come and access those documents. Otherwise, this really could get out of control and really be a drain if each individual member can go and start making demands of staff time. That really, I don't think, is the intention of the committee, where that would be the burdens would start to outweigh the benefits in that area. So when I look at this, I think we need to include language to make it specific that, what are the procedures? That's what we were talking about. If the committee is exercising its watchdog function, how do you go about getting those documents? You put it on the agenda. You have a vote. This is an issue we want to look into as a committee. We go after it. Those are the sort of things that I'm looking for, some real specifics. I appreciate the efforts that the Financial Review Committee did to speak about this, but let's face it, it was their first meeting. They were electing their chair and their vice chair. I don't know how realistic it was to expect them to come back with all these details. And what they came back with, perhaps this is a good starting point. But the more I thought about it, and I did look up some other things. I just happened to pull one particular thing. I found a Citizens Watchdog Committee that was created for the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority several years ago. That's like our toll roads up in the Bay Area. And basically it does what I'm talking about. It reviews expenditures. They have an audit conducted each fiscal year by an independent auditor. These are things that we want to put in there that we're going to be doing. They're going to hold public hearings and issue reports on at least an annual basis to inform the residents of how the money is being spent. So it tells me on an annual basis. Well, the proposal originally came, and we didn't really. It was our first try at it, and we did vote to say they should meet once a month, I believe. To meet less often, it would require a 4/5 majority. But as I was thinking about that, it really occurred to me, what are the issues that they are going to be meeting about every month and requiring them to meet every month? I don't believe we should have a committee meet just for the sake of having meetings and just for appearances. I'd want them to actually be doing something substantive. So I think that really we should change that to have them meet less often. I would suggest, once a quarter. Now, of course, if they want to meet more often, if there's a reason, they can. Nobody's saying you can't meet more often than once a quarter. But that seems to be the better way to go, in the sense that they may end up meeting every month, especially if a majority of them say, let's meet every month because there's something we want to look into. But I think doing it the other way doesn't, it may be too much of a burden on our staff. So I'd like to see that changed. And I also see, I want to make it clear that this is a watchdog committee. We're not looking for a budget subcommittee to offer us, policy advice as to, if the money's being spent in a legal way, it's not being wasted, there's no fraud, waste, or abuse or corruption. The purpose of this committee is not to say, well, that's not a project you should be spending the money on, you should spend it somewhere else. That's a policy decision for the city council. So I want to make it clear that this is a watchdog committee that is looking into the decisions we make and the money we're spending and making sure that we are being good stewards of the public's money. So, having said that, again, I'll turn it over. There'll probably be more discussion, and I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say as well. But I think we need to mark this up a little bit before we just go ahead and pass it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. You do realize all the information they're looking at are public records. Anybody has access to this information simply by requesting it, whether they're on a committee or whether they're not on a committee. All of this information, the public's money, are publicly available records that can be had by anybody by simply making a Public Record Act request. And staff will have to go through the same thing, except that it will be individual by individual versus a committee meeting once a month and asking for things. So that's my first point. My second point is that this is the committee's vote on how they want to proceed. They have voted on this. I believe this is a 5-0 vote, but we can ask the committee, they're here, that they do want to meet once a month. They can meet less often, being once a quarter, which is what we stated in our first motion that was agreed to by you and Mr. Miller. So I'm not sure what you're getting at. The committee has already met. These are what they feel they want to achieve and the method that they want to achieve it by, and they are looking at our public records. So, Mr. Tomlinson, did you have comments?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I do. I share some of Councilmember Miller's concerns about how you guided this committee in its formation and your involvement in it. And I wouldn't personally do those things myself, so I was very concerned when these things were occurring. I'm like, wow, that seems like something I wouldn't personally do. I do have a question for staff, though, possibly on page 9, item 10. Maybe Mr. Killebrew can answer this. During the audit, how did the city handle access to independent auditors before this committee was established?
Item 10 is that the FRC shall...
That was looking under, there's another 10 later on that page. Access to the auditors has been provided the opportunity to city council members. So there's a communication from the auditors to the city council members offering to meet with them. And we started that, I think, 4 years ago. That was a new item.
So will council members still have the authority to meet with the independent auditors, or will this be shifted to the
I would not
Financial Review Committee?
I would not recommend giving up that opportunity for the elected officials to meet with the auditors, and I think the auditors would appreciate still meeting with the elected officials. At the end of the day, it's your business. So.
Okay, so I have a question. Are you saying that number 10 is in some way relinquishing the city council's right?
Well, I was asking the question. I just wanted informationally. And then now, so under this proposed item 10, it would be the 5 city council members and then the 5 committee members from the Financial Review Committee that could have access.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, that's my comments right now.
Mr. Wyatt?
So I sort of organized. So first of all, I'm under the impression, maybe incorrectly, but under the impression that the charter that the committee laid out. They got together, they worked with staff, they held a meeting, got others involved, and tried to craft a charter that the 5 of them felt would help them contribute as a financial review committee. Am I mistaken about how this attachment A was ultimately drafted and approved? I thought it was put together. I mean, there are lots of people who had input, but ultimately the 5 people in the room with the assistance of staff, as my understanding is.
At the end of the day, the Financial Review Committee voted 5-0 to accept what I believe is what we have included in here in this draft policy. At the beginning of that item, when it came up at the Financial Review Committee meeting, there was actually a draft presented by member Nelson, and she stated that she had spoken with the mayor about it and put that draft together, and that was our jumping off point into the discussion, was from that draft. And yes, there was a lot of discussion on every item in there, and at the end, with agreed upon edits as we went through it, there was a 5-0 vote.
Okay, I just, and I guess in terms of sort of thinking through what Councilmember Vixoric said, so I view it a little bit more than looking at fraudulent things and misspent. I mean, certainly I don't anticipate we have a lot of things where fraud is actually taking place, and I certainly hope we don't. If it were discovered, I would certainly want it brought to attention. What I worry more about, and my initial reaction was quarterly ought to be enough. There's a quarterly report put together. In fact, we have the mid-year report, which is essentially the end of the second quarter for this fiscal year we're in today's meeting. My concern initially to get set up is that we are seeing this report for the first time today. It takes the time for the staff to get the financials together, do the mid-year, and we are now 2 months and a bit into the third quarter. So what I've been trying to do is take the monthly report and tie it back to the last quarterly report and just figure out how on track we are, as the months accumulate, because we have the January one in now, so it's 5 weeks after the fact, but that's reasonable for me to look at trends. So the monthly meetings, as they start off, gives them a chance to be a little quicker, because right now, if you want to adjust for the month, we're 2+ weeks into the month. That's only 3, or into a quarter that's only 3 long. So if we want to meet on the quarterly, we're doing it a little further after the fact than I'm comfortable with. Mike, you have a?
If I could, really quick, on February 7th, so 5 weeks after the end of the quarter, we had an agenda item on the council agenda for the second quarter financial update.
Yeah.
The quote mid-year, that's a term the city's always used for the report that's on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
It's it's a mid-year correction. Yes, it's in early March, but again, the quarterly financial report was put out a month ago and given to council.
Good. Anyway, I'm just if it turns out, I mean, the ideal situation I actually think would end up where each of those quarterly reports would be a really good document to really focus on analyzing and pulling together, and I think it would work well with staff to do that, because that's a key report to do. We got a little bit of startup issue here to get from 0 up to doing that, and that's the reason when I said I was excited about getting it started, because if I read through the charter, I could sort of pick pieces of it apart I'm not real happy about, but they put it together and they'll figure it out, I think, and I think I think there's 5 smart people that we've appointed here that can sort of adjust their way through and come back to us with recommendations if they actually need a charter change. So I'm more anxious to get moving than about knowing that we're 100% accurate on all the things we laid out here, it just seems like it's such a good step for us to take, and we need to take the step and see how it goes. We'll probably stumble a bit. Anyway, my feeling is still the same. We have good people who I think can make good contributions. We've sort of told them to take it and let us know and work closely with staff, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to take off and go and see how it works. If we feel like we have concerns, maybe we could get something on our agenda where monthly we get feedback from them on, our ideas back. I don't know. I'm just looking for a way to get moving. No.
Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm on page 9 again, and I'm looking at item 3. It says the FRC is authorized to review all city financial and operational information. What does operational information mean? How is that defined?
That's a pretty broad term, but is a contract a financial document or an operational document, or if we've got some kind of procedures in place for collection of monies, there might be procedures that are followed by staff on a regular basis that could be operational and related to financial. Operational is a pretty broad term. I think auditors, when they're looking at operational reviews, they generally walk in and it's a little bit like a desk review. If you've ever heard of one of those, you sit down with somebody and you follow them through, their daily routines and get an idea of how they operate. And as an auditor, and even in my history as a financial auditor, we did some operational reviews, and you're looking for, can you identify possible better, more efficient, or more effective ways to do things? So it's pretty broad, and as written, could be more broad than just quote financial.
Okay, I mean, that's something that I think really needs to have a little bit better definition on. I mean, I share some of my other colleagues' concerns about staff time on this. If we just open the books and say every individual committee member can go and explore anything and staff has to respond to it, that's a huge amount of staff time, and people don't really realize that equates to a huge amount of money for this city. That most of the time that means additional staffers. We need to be very, very sensitive. Our staff has to deal with quite a few different commissions and committees already. And at the end of the day, if they have to deal with 3 to 4 hours a day of different commissioners coming in and requesting data, they still have their full-time job to do after that's done. And I'm a little concerned if we don't tighten this up a little bit, the requests of staff time could get a little bit out of control, and we could start seeing some deficiencies in other areas. So I'd like to take a look at that and maybe...
If I could chime in, I want to broaden that operational discussion also. There could, honestly, I think under the watchdog title, be operational issues that would need to be reviewed. I'm thinking of a North Orange County city that had some wire transfer fraud issues, that there are procedural or quote operational issues on signature authorities and that kind of stuff. So, to some extent, operational would be needed for a fraud review or something along those lines.
And I'm okay with that. I just think we need to tighten it up a little bit and have a little bit better definition of it. There's been discussion tonight about quarterly meetings. I think as a policy moving forward, this is a brand new committee, and they're going to need to meet more than quarterly right now. There's no doubt about that. But as a policy that we're putting in place right now, quarterly seems to be probably a little bit more appropriate, because after we get through the budget periods and this committee kind of feels its way, settles out on what it's going to do, I doubt we're going to need monthly meetings on this. We might. And they're going to have the ability at their meetings to vote on whether or not they want to meet the next month if there's something there. So I think as a policy, quarterly makes a lot more sense instead of making a monthly and having to cancel meetings every month. I mean, because staff has to also also has to schedule time to create the reports, set the date, show up for the meetings. So I would support a quarterly meeting with the ability of the committee to vote to meet more often as needed, and fully understanding as it starts, they're probably going to have to meet every month for 4 or 5 months, I would imagine, going into budget time. In terms of what the committee can request, I do agree that it should be a consensus with the committee. It should be a 3/5 vote. This is what our goals are this quarter, this month, whatever it happens to be. And then they can come to staff and say, this is what we need from you. Instead of having 5 individual members come in and say, this is my little pet project this month, and it's going to take staff 10 hours to pull a report together, and the rest of the committee doesn't agree that that's a priority for us right now, I don't think that's a good use of staff time. So I think we need to tighten that up as well. Let me ask a question about the audits. And I know the chair of the FRC is here, and I want to ask a question to the committee members, and since the chair's here, I'll ask him if you'd like to come up to the podium. I'm back to number 10 on page 9 about the auditors. And I see that the committee wants access to the independent auditor during the planning of the annual financial audit and after the audit. What's the reasoning for that?
Really quick, I just want to address myself. I'm Brian Porter. I live on Manta Court in Dana Point. Thank you, Council, Madam Mayor, and staff for having me or to address it. What we discussed at our first meeting, and I do want to preface, there was a time constraint when we were going through it because of going through all of the training that we had from the city attorney ahead of time. What we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure we covered everything. We didn't want to limit ourselves in our first meeting. The biggest thing that I believe that we're all under the same impression is we need to get an understanding of how the city's been budgeted for the last few years, not even just this last one. I mean, I know that you're coming to the conclusion of a 2-year budget, so we wanted to take a look at that. We want to really get an understanding of the trends that have been happening and things. So we didn't want to, when we created the format based upon the template, we didn't want to limit ourselves. And we all agreed that we definitely have to meet monthly just to get a good understanding of what's going on. The biggest thing, though, from my takeaway of it and what I've expressed during that is transparency to the council as well, that if we have questions or concerns, we need to go through the channel of putting it in the minutes, sending it back up to the council. The council then can recommend, debate. You know, we're here to do your work and do these investigations, but we can't operate independently. The other thing I would do is, in hindsight, reviewing everything, is to make sure that besides our update, that the city can put in there, hey, we've spent 20 hours this month, we spent 10 hours this month. I think it's important to understand, to everyone's statement earlier, how much staff time, additional staff time is going into it. Are we incurring overtime from it? I don't think we should just have run amok of what's going on, but I do think it's important that we do have transparency and we can look at what's going on. If we're requesting something, it's down in there so public can see what we're requesting and why we're requesting it, and then our feedback. Again, we don't vote on anything. The only thing we're going to vote on is to have consensus on what we're bringing forth back to the council for you to review, take in, make it recommendations and kick it back down to us, but it has to go through the proper channels of the minutes from the meeting and things like that. Or you can attend our meetings once we have them solidified, posted, and things like that. That'd be the other thing, is to do that so at least it's on public, on the record, that everyone has the transparency to see the dialogue that's going on between council and the committee.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Why do you want to meet with the auditors?
To understand what
that.
Because we want to understand what they're seeing, what they're looking at, why they're looking at it, so it can help us understand a better scope of what's going on. The auditors are there as an outside resource. It's another outside committee as far as or another outside set of eyes. And if the auditors are, going down somewhere and we hadn't seen it either, it's something that we can talk about and really dig into. Is there something there or is there not? An auditor is just going to look at it. They're going to raise their hand up and say, this might be something, and then move on, because it can be dismissed by staff. That's just how we always do it, and we've done this, and they've got backup and support documents to support that. So in any audit, as it goes through the first round, it can be dismissed away by an outside resource. So we just want to have access. Again, pure transparency.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Killebrew, or I guess Mr. Munoz is probably a better question for you. When they meet with the auditor, can they actually, since they're a committee, have a closed session and do this in closed session?
As a committee, they could have closed sessions under appropriate circumstances, but that would not be an appropriate Brown Act closed session. So to the degree there's going to be auditor meetings, we discussed that we'll have to figure out a way to do it with, individuals or groups of two, that sort of a thing.
Okay. All right. It goes back. Thank you for your response. If anybody else has questions for him, that's great. But Mike, just real quick, and I'll finish up, and then you guys can go. It goes back to my concern about staff time, cost of this, because if an auditor has to come in and meet with, I guess we could do it as the council, meet with the auditor in closed session? No, we couldn't even do that, so we would have to do it the same way?
That's correct.
So if we wanted to have meetings with them, we're going to have to pay that auditor to come in and spend a day meeting with different council members and commissioners?
We've had it included in our audit contract and procedures that they've made the offer. There's been a couple council members that have met with them. I think part of it is it's available, and that's...
For an additional cost?
Everything's always an additional cost, but we've got it included in there as not as a line item necessarily, but it's in the scope of work that they need to offer it, and if there's a meeting, there's a meeting. I don't think I've seen one go more than 45 minutes on a meeting, and they've always been individual, not in twos or in a group.
Okay, Mr. Parker, thank you for that explanation. It was very well received, and I understand it now. Thanks.
And I just wanted to
Mr. Wyatt?
thank you for being willing to serve and help us get better understanding and just stay on top of our. Thank you very much.
Yes, and myself included, and we met for a while before this meeting, and I got a good understanding of what your understanding was, and I appreciated that, and thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, I do have a question.
Yes, Mr. Tomlinson?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for agreeing to serve on the committee and lead the committee. I wanted to follow up on one of your comments that you would like to see that the committee decide what to bring up to the council that they wanted to look at. That's not in the document currently as it's outlined, is it?
No, I think the clarification would be if through our processes, we're digging in and we're going back, looking at historical data that's been there, and we find something, we cannot say this is inappropriate. We would say we found this, then we need to tee it back up to the council on what we feel and why we feel it might be inappropriate, misspent, whatever. That's your job as a council to then rule on what you want to do with it. We're going to point it out, but we can't vote on anything. We can't make decisions. We're not elected officials. We're here serving the city of Dana Point to find any improprieties, any misspends, maybe what we could maybe try something different to do things to lower our costs. We'd bring that forth to you. It's not like we can go sit and request bids and things like that. We may say, hey, through investigation, we found this. The city hasn't gone out to bid on this in 10 years. We might want to go and do that. We'd bring it back to council. We'd go actually through staff. Staff would then tee it back up to council. They may give their input on historical reasons on why that would happen and move forward from there.
I think my question was more geared towards abilities of individual committee members to request information and from staff. So you kind of proposed an idea that's not in this document, I believe, that said, okay, you as a committee would decide what you guys are going to look at as a group, not each individual committee member designating, oh, I want to look at this, committee member B wants to look at this.
Well, we'd have to agree upon that at a meeting. Everyone was going to get together after reading the stacks of information that we were provided to about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks, have our next meeting, and then start digging into what do we want to look at. Because again, I agree with you. We can't have 5 fingers having staff run all over the place. We have to come to a consensus per meeting, per month, per whatever time period it is, on what we want to look at, why do we want to look at it. I think that's important too, on why, the why of what it is we're digging into, instead of someone trying to just go down a rabbit hole, wasting tons and tons of labor, time, our meetings, to come up with nothing and say, okay, this is just, it's a bad thing. We're here to help the city, not make anyone look foolish, not make the city look foolish, not make us look foolish that we're wasting tons of dollars running around trying to investigate how every penny's being spent here. It's more, to me, I see it as we're going to look for anomalies that are happening or that have happened that aren't trending out right, or that it just seems like any of the bulk spend, that we definitely look at that first and say, is there anything that we see that's, sticking out like a sore thumb? It was shared with us at our meeting that one of the biggest spends is our public safety. All right, is there anything in there that we don't see, or is it just going to be status quo? I think that's the thing, is that we're going to push the limit on the status quo and just ask questions. Ask questions of staff. As far as the individuals on this committee, they're extremely intelligent. They all have very, very deep-rooted financial backgrounds. So I think that if there's something there, they'll find it quickly, and then we can bring it forward and then have conversation about it. But to me, it's more of, we find it, we bring it up, what do you guys want us to do with it?
And thank you for providing a comment about meeting monthly. That was one of my questions. Well, shouldn't this be a quarterly meeting? If you guys decide to meet monthly, then you could do so. But I think you cleared up some of my questions I had about meeting monthly for right now. So
we've already kind of laid out a rough plan, since we're coming up to our fiscal year end, that we've got our Monday, the end of the month, already slated, and then we're already starting to talk about our April date. It's kind of juggling around just because of our schedules, pre-commitments that we've already had, so we're trying to work around that. We said that in May we may have a few more meetings. They may be the independent ones, because that's usually end of May, early June is what was told to us with the auditors. We want to meet with them before, to what they've seen in previous audits, if they were assigned to the city, and then post on what they found through it and things that would stick out. And then obviously the fiscal starts on July, and then we'll probably, I don't know, do we break in July because you go dark in August, or do we, we're still trying to work it out. Everything's still a work in progress for us. I think we definitely put a foundation onto it with the guidance and everything that has already come down. I do think there'll continually be some tweaks made, because it is so wide open right now. It's the wild, wild west, and we're given a little bit of parameters on it. So I do feel that it will be dialogue through. I don't necessarily think that this is the proper format. I think by having the minutes be a more appropriate one, just because there's a lot more content there. You can have the records. Not all of us can make all these different meetings, and I think that it's to make sure that all of our minutes are correct. We received them. I've had no issues with them. I don't believe anyone else did. So then it was presented to you, and I think that's the most appropriate way to be communicating our information back to you, instead of individual communications here and there.
thank you for answering my questions. Madam Mayor, I have no further questions from the witness at this point.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you and tell you that hearing you, I'm very happy and very optimistic that the committee is going to do the kind of work that I know I had anticipated when this was in my mind.
Great. Anything else?
Mr. Bazort?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have one follow-up on Councilmember Tomlinson's question about the meeting once a month. He said he cleared it up, but it sort of confused me a little bit. I understand that you all plan on meeting once a month. We're discussing how to set up whether that would be up to you to vote to meet once a month. We would set it up quarterly, and if you want to meet more often, you certainly can decide to do that. Or if we should mandate that you have to meet once a month, and that's going to be in this document, and the only way you can't meet once a month is if there's a 4/5 vote. Right. So if you could clarify for me where you stand on that.
I think that once a 2-year budget is passed by the city, I think a quarterly meeting is probably appropriate, where we're just reviewing to make sure that, because the budget can't be changed. It can be modified. A budget, once the budget's passed, it can't be changed. So for us to meet more often than that, I don't think it's appropriate. But right now, because we don't know what we don't know, we really need to kind of dig in and get into what's been done historically. And we're trying to play catch up because you've got a fiscal year end here coming up. So I think we do need to meet right now monthly, because we've got some catching up to do and a better understanding of what we're dealing with. We may even go to probably 2 meetings in May to make sure we're dialed in before the auditors and then post the auditors. I don't want to meet more than I have to, trust me. There's a few of us that are like, hey, we still work for a living, so we don't want to consume our time. But we do want to put our best foot forward for a brand-new program or for a brand-new committee for the city. I'd rather, look, if you guys want to pass quarterly and as needed, fine with me, because I don't think once the budget's done that we need to meet more than that, unless there's a special meeting call because anyone on the council finds something that says, hey, I was reviewing something or I read something from another commission. Can you guys look at this and request us to have a special meeting outside of that quarterly one? I have no problem with that, and I think we would all be accommodating to that. But that's how I see it. Once we get our feet firmly planted into what we're doing and get a rhythm going, which we don't have one yet, we're still trying to figure it out.
Right.
I think that quarterly would be fine.
Thank you. I think you've answered my question.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Just one follow-up question, Mr. Vixor's question.
Mr. Tomlinson?
The 4/5 thing is not in the document at this point, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about
I was about
the
to correct that myself.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Porter? Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
And Ms. Nelson, are you still interested in speaking? Also a member of this committee. And thank you very much for that.
Hi, Tony Nelson, Capistrano Beach. I just wanted to clear up any confusion. I know that Mr. Miller in particular was very confused about what the process was in terms of coming up with our mandate and our mission statement and so on. And so I want to clarify that. First of all, it was Mayor Lewis's item. She brought it to the council, I don't remember, maybe a month ago. And she had asked that we expand the mandate of the Financial Review Committee, and she had some specific ideas for what she wanted. So when we were appointed to the committee, I reached out to her, I did it, and said, could you please help me and put in legal language, the sort of format that you're looking for. And she complied and sent that to me. I then took that and expanded it quite substantially and added things that, from my own experience as a CPA and a business consultant and all of that, that I felt that a body like this should be doing. There was nothing untoward. There was nothing. I will be very happy to show you exactly what she sent me, exactly my additions to it, and it was done openly and transparently in the committee. My feeling was just maybe because I'm a consultant that I don't go to a meeting unprepared. And so I knew that since our mandate was to meet and decide what our mission was and what our procedures would be and what our areas of coverage would be, I created a draft. That draft, I immediately said, instead of starting from zero, can we start with this draft? I was not the only member with such information. I believe Mr. Rolap had his own ideas and had some things drafted. We just started from my document and we added and subtracted. I think the idea about the auditor was Mr. Killebrew's suggestion. I didn't even have that in the original one, and then he added it in. But it was a very free-flowing, open meeting, and I was really pleased with it. I felt that it showed so much transparency, and I commend the council for actually wanting to have a committee like this to offer financial advice and to sort of work as a watchdog for the city. It's done a bit. I looked online. There's several cities and counties that have it across the nation, and I commend you for it. I think it's a sign that there's nothing to be hidden, that there's complete transparency, and that you can use some financial experts in the city to kind of take an overview for you and tell you what we see. And in terms of going into nitty-gritty, I can't imagine that we will use a ton of staff time because almost everything is in the reports that we already have. Mr. Killebrew gave us piles and piles of information. It's going to take me a while to digest just that. And so much of the information is already available online. I can't imagine us asking staff to do a lot of anything. And I was actually quite impressed that Mr. Killebrew in particular was so open and so willing to open the books and let us take a look at how things are done. And I think he's kind of excited about getting someone else's opinion. So I just wanted to clear that up. I didn't want there to be any suggestion that anything unusual was going on. It was a completely open process. And I'll be happy to show you anything you want. I'm not sure what the text was about. I'll have to go back. I don't have my phone with me, but I'll be happy to show you the text too. It was something innocuous. I just asked Buck if he could remember what it was, but I think she had thought our meeting was over and said, how did such and such go? And I commented on it in the meeting, but that's all it was. But I'd be very happy to show you anything that you want to see. I'm comfortable with everything that we discussed and very comfortable showing anybody anything that they want. So,
if I could clarify really quick, member Rolap recommended meetings with the auditors.
Was it him?
The pre-meeting and post-meeting, and my recommendation on top of that was that the committee, and I've seen this in other, not just in government, but other entities where a finance committee actually interviews the potential auditors that bid on the audit project when it's put out to bid. So my recommendation was that they participate in the bidding process, in the bid review process.
If yes. I can have one more second. One thing I wanted to comment on as well is Mr. Victoric mentioned sort of an audit role, and I just want to make it clear that that's not what we're doing. I'm a CPA, I've worked as an auditor, but this is not an audit function. We will not be attesting as to the fairness of your financial statements. We will not be going in and looking for fraud. We're looking much more at a broader overview of the city. And we're looking at the finances, looking at the trends, looking at your reserves, looking at your, the ratios, the financial ratios, that kind of thing. I don't think we would even get into the nitty-gritty unless there was a specific request from the council that we look at something. But we are not auditors at all. We're just simply an advisory committee. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Nelson? Thank you very much. Oh, Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Nelson, thank you for coming up and clarifying that for me. One of the other things I wanted to mention when I watched that video is I did not realize what your background was, and we had a chance to speak about that, and it was very impressive. Mr. Hill, same with you. I'm very impressed by what you've done. Very excited to have you guys on this committee. I think this is exactly what the city needs. What we're trying to talk about up here is a policy document that's going to go on forever until it's changed by somebody, and one of the things we don't want to do is have to change it every month. And so we're trying to look out into the future. What's this committee really going to need? What are they going to do? And we're trying to create that document today. Now, it's going to be tough. We probably are going to have to make changes to it. But I really want to thank you for coming up and clarifying that. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you willing to volunteer on this committee. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too, Mr. Hill. Thanks for volunteering.
I would like to ask that the letter that we all received, it's to the Honorable Deborah Lewis and the Dana Point City Council. It was distributed to each of us on 2/6/16 from Eric Woolery, CPA Auditor Controller, the County of Orange. And I'd like a copy of this to also go in the record. Dear Mayor Lewis and members of the City Council, I was very pleased to learn that the Dana Point City Council unanimously supported taking steps to expand the role of the city's Financial Review Committee. As Orange County's elected audited controller, I take my own role as our taxpayer watchdog seriously. That's why I believe the transparency of and accountability for our public finances are so critical. By recognizing these two principles and taking meaningful action to address them, you are indeed working to build an environment of openness and trust for
for Dana Point taxpayers. Thank you again for working to strengthen the public's confidence in our local municipal finances. Please feel free to consider me a resource in county government. I hope you'll contact me directly if I can ever be of assistance to you or our mutual constituents. Sincerely, Eric H. Woolery, Auditor Controller, County of Orange. So there is currently a motion and a second. Is there further debate?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Vazorek?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I guess I have a copy of that letter as well. It's from the county auditor controller, but I just heard that this committee is not going to be doing an auditing function. So I wonder why the county auditor would be so excited about this committee. I mean, clearly, my understanding, what a watchdog group does is it does look for fraud, waste, and abuse. And that's what I thought we were creating. So I just wanted to make that statement. I do have a question, again, getting into the actual language, because I do think we need to mark this up, because as I stated initially, I think it's way too broad. And I know there's been some questions about what the operational information means. I'm looking at, I'll direct this question to Mr. Killebrew. I'm looking at page 8, scope of work, paragraph 7. Actually, let me ask you about paragraph 8. Make recommendations to the city council regarding financial policies to include but not limited to the budget, reserves, investments, and debt. What does that mean to you?
Let me start with, I'll start on the right, debt. So debt policies. Cities can have debt policies. We currently have one that relates to Mello-Roos District. So there is a goals and policies that the city council adopted after the Finance Review Committee back in, I want to say, 2005 or 6, talked about that specific debt policy. So there could be possibly, even though debt's a dirty word in Dana Point, there could possibly be debt considered by a future city council, and there might be a policy on how much debt, or there's different ways to look at that. So debt policy. Investment policy, we've already talked about. We have an investment policy. We're required to have an investment policy, and this committee would be looking at that investment policy. What can we legally invest in? Reserve policies. The city council back in 2005 or 6 delegated to the then Investment Review Committee to recommend some financial policies for the city. So we have a general fund reserve policy that establishes how much we have to keep in our emergency reserve and our capital reserve and our cash flow reserve. There's also a capital policy for budgeting for capital projects and funding capital projects. There could be more policies. So, but whether it's budget or reserves, it's a policy along those lines that, honestly, it's usually what I've seen, and I had this in my prior experience, was the council had a desire to establish a policy, and they would actually refer some specific topic to the committee. The way this is written, it could go in either direction. But again, they could have a discussion on a particular issue area that's budget, investments, debt, so on, and make a recommendation to the council. So it's pretty broad. Anything finance, I think, is the way I'm reading this.
Okay, I want to be clear. I mean, if we pass this, I want to get it on the record that they're acting as a watchdog, not a policy making body or recommending where we should spend the money. That's our decision as the policy-making body, but rather reviewing as a watchdog if the money is being spent in a way that implicates fraud, waste, or abuse, or any type of corruption. And I think, well, it appeared that I was going to be the last one to make any comments on this. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say, but is the current motion that we pass it without any of the markups? Am I correct? Is that the motion on the floor?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll have to offer an amendment then to that, to add in the clarifying language about the things I've been talking about, that this is a watchdog committee. I think we need to put it in paragraph 7 in the scope of work under 7A. Under 8, I think under access and limitations, we need to put in that the access to the documents requires the committee acting, as a committee of voting to pursue various issues. And I think we need to add in that they meet quarterly unless they vote to meet more often.
Okay, so let me make a couple points, Mr. Vazorek. First of all, your point on 8, that you're concerned that they may be making policy. 8, for those people who don't have the charter that was passed by this committee unanimously in front of them, 8 says make recommendations to the city council regarding financial policies. Not that they will make policies or that they are authorized. So they limit their scope to simply making recommendations to the city council. Then to your amendments, I am very unclear as to what the language of your amendments are. So if you could please clarify exactly what you are amending so we can vote on that and have a clear record.
See if I can make it more clear for you.
Thank you.
We need to indicate that this committee is serving as a watchdog committee, not a policy-making committee.
And where would you like that inserted?
In 7A, as well as 8.
I think if you'll glance, at number 4, these numbers are wrong. They kind of skip around. Up above, under access and limitations.
Yes.
The FRC has no legislative powers and exists solely to advise the city council on financial matters. Committee reports, advice, and opinions have no direct legal impact on the city of Dana Point.
Okay, and this is Mr. Hill,
Isn't that what
another
you're-
member of the committee. Could you tell me where you are reading, please?
Just above, there's a paragraph that says access and limitations, and there's a number 4 in that.
Okay.
I think these are misnumbered when they got typed.
I see. So did you see that, Mr. Vazorek? The FRC has no legislative powers on
Yes,
page
Madam
9.
Mayor, I saw that.
Okay. Does that
No,
speak
Madam
to your...
Mayor, I'm
okay.
making my motion. If we could continue with regular order here and continue my motion that I'm making, and we'll see if there's a second, if there's support for it, and we can have a vote on it.
Okay. So what I'm hearing then is you want the language that states, this committee is serving as a watchdog committee, not a policymaking committee, inserted in paragraph 7 and paragraph 8. Is that correct?
Yes.
And where in paragraph 7? At the end, is that okay?
In 7A.
7A, at the beginning
Or
of...
you could make it 7E.
Okay,
Excuse me.
so add a 7E, and where in 8?
Well, 8 is simply,
At the end, at the
One.
beginning, where would you like?
put it after the end of the first sentence that's not in bold.
Okay, so after policies to include but not be limited to budget, reserves, investment, and debt, and thereafter state, this committee is serving as a watchdog committee, not a policymaking committee. Is that correct? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that's the amendment on the table to the main motion to approve the Financial Review Committee charter as approved by the Financial Committee, and that has been seconded. So do we have a second?
Also, I wanted to add in that the requirement under access and limitations be from a vote of the committee to access these documents, and that the committee meet quarterly unless they decide to meet more often.
Okay, so what language do you want inserted in access and limitations, and where do you want that?
Well, it's labeled paragraph 3 under
Okay.
access and limitations.
Paragraph 3.
It says,
Can I make a quick comment here, just be, Madam Mayor?
Well, let me just finish his
Okay.
amendment, if you wouldn't mind, and then.
Certainly.
Absolutely. Okay, so paragraph 3, under access and limitations, what language do you want put in that Roman numeral 3?
access to such documents, information requires a majority vote of the Financial Review Committee.
Okay, and what was your other amendment?
Organization, paragraph 11.
Hmm?
The FRC, you can delete, is to meet monthly, to have it meet quarterly,
Paragraph, let's see.
unless a majority of the committee votes to meet more often.
Okay, so you are striking out the word monthly, where it says the FRC is to meet monthly. You will substitute the word quarterly. The FRC is to meet quarterly on a set date and time. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then
Unless-
after that sentence, instead of ending it with a period, you will then add the words unless,
A majority of the committee votes to meet more often.
okay. Any other changes?
I think that.
Could I have the opportunity to clean up the numbering also? I have no idea what happened when we printed, so if I could, with the council members' blessing here, can I read through?
I will accept it. if
Can
you
I,
want to
okay,
clean up
here,
the
this
numbers.
is, if I just want to read through the numbers, starting on the left side, the new numbers, 6 will be 1, 7 will be
Wait a
2.
minute, what are you doing?
The
Hold
numbers
on.
are under
Yeah.
scope of work instead of saying 6.
Madam Mayor, that was my comment, was the numbering is off. I was looking at the content, but now I realize all the numbering is off on these, so.
Okay, so what are we doing here?
The magic of
Start
word
from 1 and
processing.
go.
Scope of work, which is now 6.
Let
We
me
strike
start,
it,
6
and
will
that
be 1, 7 will be 2, 8 will be 3, 9 will be 4, 10 will be 5. That's scope of work.
Okay,
Access and limitations, 3 will be 1, and 4 will be 2. And then when we move into organization, we're going to start with 1 instead of 7, and go 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
do you think it would be less confusing if we didn't start the numbers over again and just
You
kept them
can,
going?
you can do whatever you want, or leave it
And
as
then
I
we
just
don't have to
recommended.
refer to access and limitations 1. So let's just start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then keep going. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and each paragraph is its own discrete paragraph, which will make it easier to refer. So access and limitations 3 becomes 6, access and limitation 4 becomes 7.
Madam Mayor, that works unless we add something later.
Well, we could have a 6A, a 7A. You can always put something in there. Okay. So it's organization, 7 starts 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Does everybody follow that? Is that something you can't follow? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
That's fine.
So you're accepting it?
I'll accept that amendment to my amendment.
I'm actually just trying to clarify things so we can just move on here. Okay, so your amendment will now be, let's see, paragraph 7 and 8 will be paragraph 2. You will add a 2E and 3 after the first sentence. Access and limitations would be paragraph 7. And then paragraph 11 will now be paragraph 12. So would you like me to go through your amendment to make sure it is what you understand it to be?
I think it was pretty clear. It's on the record. The minutes will probably reflect what my motion is. So no,
Okay.
I don't need that.
Does everybody understand what they're voting on then, on this amendment?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any debate on the amendment?
Now, I think it's pretty clear that, you know, the mission that what was talked about by Mr. Hill is to not be right. Correct. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Hill. So I think that's a little bit redundant, but you know, to get this thing moving, I would certainly.
Okay. We ready to vote? Okay, so the amendment passes 5-0. So just for the record, I am going to repeat this amendment. So on paragraph 2E and 3 at the end of the first sentence, we will be adding, this committee is serving as a watchdog committee, not a policy-making committee. Excuse me, sorry. I believe I have the floor here. It's okay. Paragraph 7. Under access and limitations, access to such documents, information requires a majority vote of the Financial Review Committee. And paragraph 12, we will strike out the word monthly, substitute quarterly, and add the phrase at the end of the first sentence, add unless a majority of the Financial Review Committee votes to meet more often. Okay, as amended, do I have a motion to now accept the Financial Review Committee charter, which is attachment A here, as amended?
I just want to make sure somebody tracked those numbers. With those new numbers that you read out reflected the new paragraph pad numeration. Okay, very
I'm
good.
gonna read those again.
Yes, I will read the
Just a little
paragraph
unclear.
numbers again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
I think that's pretty clear now.
And also where, what
I
I meant
hope
was
so.
where the amendments were. Now, we had in paragraph 2,
Paragraph
2E is an amendment. Paragraph 3
Yes.
has an amendment. Paragraph
7.
6, I have it on.
That which was paragraph 4. You wanted it in
No,
paragraph
but I
4.
want it after
access
paragraph
and-
3. Paragraph 6 at the end of that sentence.
Okay. And
Paragraph 12.
paragraph 12. All right,
All right.
They went sequentially. There you go. We have it.
good. Okay. Item,
I just want to
Miller?
say thank you. We got it done. We've got a financial review committee with its marching orders, correct?
I think we actually still have to vote on that, but I think we do.
I thought we already voted on it.
no, we just voted on it.
Yeah, we just voted on
Asked
it.
about another motion, that's the reason I said.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
good.
I just
Okay.
want to say
I believe you may be right.
thanks.
Did we vote? I think you may be right, Mr. Wyatt.
We
So,
voted on amending it.
You're
Now
right.
We have to vote on accepting the.
you're right. You're right.
I'll make that
Okay.
motion, Madam Mayor, too.
To vote for the Financial Review Committee charter as amended. Is
Yes, ma'am.
I'll second it.
Vote. Okay, the Financial Review Committee charter, as amended, is now accepted 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Wyatt.
Now I'm very excited, Madam Mayor. This is great. Great idea. Thanks.
Item 9, City Manager Recruitment Status Report. Staff report, please.
Yes, the City Council engaged Bob Murray and Associates to conduct an executive search to fill the city manager vacancy back in December. In-person interviews were conducted of the city council members by the recruiter on January 5th to put together kind of a collective agreement on what the council is looking for in a city manager candidate. Online and print advertisements have been placed in a number of publications. In addition, the recruiter has produced a brochure and sent it out to a targeted group. They do this regularly, and so they know who the candidates are out there, and they're able to screen looking for using the city council's direction as far as what an ideal candidate might be, and their knowledge of the candidate pool that's out there. The closing date for receipt of resumes is March 17th. Following the closing, the consultant, using criteria, again, collectively identified by the council, will screen those resumes as a basis upon which to narrow the field. They will then conduct preliminary interviews, and finalists will be invited for personal interviews with the city council. If I could also chime in here that they've also been sending out biweekly, they call them blasts on LinkedIn, Twitter, and additional media avenues. And again, they've been making direct calls to assistant city managers and city managers of similar communities with similar demographics who would also meet the council's criteria. And with that, I'm here to answer any questions.
Does anyone have questions? I have a question. I noticed that the first ad went in the Western Cities, thank you, around February 13. The brochure recently went out. I know I was talking to one city manager. I just happened to run into this person, and the person told me they had just gotten the brochure. Is March 17th enough time for people who have just gotten this brochure to respond? Is there, can we make this longer? What if, I'm concerned that 30 days isn't enough, so could you address that, please?
Well, first of all, this isn't my recruitment. It is on the, it's not out of the norm to have a 5 to 10 week period, but again, the recruiter I know has been blasting out information. The brochure might have just gotten out because he just got consensus from the council recently and was able to get it printed, but they had been putting out feelers, I'll guarantee you, since back in December, honestly, just letting people know that this is coming up. Whether it's too short of a time or not, I mean, it's subjective, and the council can change that direction if they so want. If they want to extend the deadline, you can't change the print ads, obviously, but online information and the personal notifications can certainly extend the deadline if the city council chooses to do so.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we have a public member wishing to speak. Mr. Zanitis.
Thank you. Mark Zanitis. I live in Dana Point. Just briefly, I think we all recognize that this decision about whom to hire for city managers may be the most important decision this council will make in the next foreseeable future. I wrote a letter urging a nationwide search. I was surprised that I didn't see when these various advertisements were put out. I tracked down one of them in the ICMA newsletter, February 14th. To me, a search this important should not be limited to 31 days. That's just not enough time. The status report, such as it is, doesn't tell us whether or not anybody has really responded or good candidates. We have no idea. whether or not these blasts and so forth are effective or there have been reasonable responses. But it is quite really surprising, if not shocking to me, that this short time fuse was put on a search of this importance. And I'm disappointed to hear that the city has taken the view that it's not, my search kind of thing. Well, it is the city's search. Indisputably, it's the city's search. And the search firm is an agent of the city and should be given direction by and from the city, guided by whatever experience, of course, a search firm has. But all I finally want to say is if somebody really fantastic does not show up in this search, it needs to be extended, because this decision is too important to be crabbed by a 31-day time frame. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Killebrew, if you could just, for myself and anyone listening, explain, okay, once the deadline passes, what is the process after that?
So after it closes, the recruiter says that he would take about a week to screen the applications. Following that, the recruiter would conduct preliminary interviews to determine which ones would be presented to the city council. The projected date of meeting with the council to discuss recommendations would be anticipated the first week of April. The council will see resumes of all applicants, and they would be looking to have interviews with the council sometime around the middle of April, April 17th, no sooner than April 17th, so 17th, possibly the end of the month, depending on calendars. And the projected date for a newly appointed city manager is obviously to be determined. Like the recruiter said, there's a lot of variables, so.
And so if any member of the council wanted to interview someone that the recruiter didn't pick, I assume that we would have that ability.
I think the city council would have the ability to make that decision.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so the recommended action is that the city council receive and file the status report. Do I have a motion?
Say something.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Zanitis brought up a really good point. What do we do if we don't have an applicant that we think is good enough? What's our procedure for that? I mean, the 30 days, I understand. I mean, if we could stretch this out to 90 days, 120 days, but we could have a really good candidate in there that ends up taking another job in the interim while we're stretching this out. So that's kind of a, I mean, how long do we make it? But the better question is, what if we don't find somebody that we like and we think would be acceptable? What's the process for that?
You cast the net out there again.
Right.
So I guess my question is more, if the recruiter doesn't present somebody we think is acceptable, do we have to extend his contract?
You could hire a different recruiter.
Well, but it's gonna. My question
There is a cost.
Right. That's what I'm trying to get at. How do we do that? Obviously, we have to cast the net again, but do we have to pay for another recruitment? Is my question. And I don't remember if that was addressed in our contract with him.
If you gave me a minute, I could pull the contract up and look. I believe there's some language that allows for some extended work. I don't believe it's wide open though. But if you gave me a minute, I could pull it up.
Okay. Would we like to wait?
Does anybody want to recess?
2 or 3 minutes would be fine with me.
Okay, we're in recess. Item number 10, overview of the city's membership in the League of California Cities.
Wait, we gotta go back to.
City manager recruitment.
Oh. Okay. Want to, is anybody making a motion to receive and file the city manager recruitment status report?
Madam Mayor.
I believe this acting city manager had some information for
So
us.
the contract with Bob Murray and Associates, if the council does not select a candidate from those presented, then you can either hire Bob Murray and Associates again. I don't know, we could probably negotiate something, but the contract does not provide for a free redo. What it does provide for is if you do hire somebody and you fire them within a year, they'll redo the recruitment for you.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor. One question.
Mr. Tomlinson?
If we were to extend the period for March 17th, is there any penalty for extending the timeline?
I would have to check with the consultant. There wasn't a provision to do that. If it doesn't add any work, I might be able to swing a good deal out of it though, so, if not free, but. So extending the timeline may not, but I would have to check with the consultant.
Thank you, Mr. Kilbro.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, do I have a motion on the city manager recruitment status report?
Move the item.
I'll second that.
Okay. Vote. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item 10, overview of the city's membership in the League of California Cities. Staff report?
Recommendation is to receive and file this overview. I'm going to give a brief overview, but want to point out also that we have Tony Cardenas, who's this area's League of California Cities representatives, is also here to answer any questions. And I know our resident expert here on league operations is Councilmember Joe Miller. With that, the League of California Cities is an association of cities within the state of California. Their mission is to expand and protect local control for cities. The league was formed to share best practices and to discuss public policy, legislation, and other issues that may have an impact on local governments. The league includes over 473 members, which make up 98% of all of California cities, and provides policy advocacy services on behalf of the cities. The construct of the board makeup of the League of California Cities is laid out in this report. I do want to point out that the league's policy-making processes engages city officials. There are approximately 50 officials that serve on each of the league's 8 policy committees, which include administrative services, community services, employee relations, environmental quality, housing, community and economic development, public safety, revenue and taxation, and the last one is transportation, communication, and public works. I want to point out that Councilmember Joe Miller is on the Revenue and Taxation Policy Committee. There are also 10 municipal departments or specialty areas that are made up of city attorneys, another one for city clerks, city managers, fire chiefs, fiscal officers, mayors and council members, personnel and employee relations, planning and community development, police chiefs, and public works officers. Every year, the league does set strategic priorities. For 2017, the strategic goals are to increase funding for critical transportation and water infrastructure, to develop realistic responses to homeless crisis, and to improve the affordability of workforce housing. Before I close and turn this over for council discussion, I want to mention that the annual membership dues to the League of California Cities this year is $12,210 for the city of Dana Point.
Any questions of staff? Okay. Mr. Wyatt, this is your item. Would you like to speak first?
Well, I asked for the report because in our last council meeting, Council Member Miller suggested that there are ways we could use the league to form some subcommittees or get involved. I felt like we're missing the opportunity to use it as effectively as we could. So I wanted to get it on the agenda to talk about things we might do to better take advantage of our membership and get more involved and look, you know, and so I wanted to pursue those ideas that came up you know, in the last meeting and see how we might, you know, utilize the membership more effectively. I mean, it's $12,000 a year, and it won't break the city necessarily, but if we could use it better, I'd like to think. And so Mr. Mueller's been on, you know, is our representative, and he had some pretty good ideas. And I thought maybe we could kick him off to see how we might take advantage of some of his knowledge and better use this.
Okay.
So.
Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually asked Mr. Cardenas to come in, and he can actually address everything that Mr. Wyatt just brought up and tell us a little bit more about how we can get more involved, some of the new committees that we've been working on, and how the city can take part in that and use this in even a larger capacity.
Thank you, Mayor Lewis, members of the City Council, Tony with the League of California Cities. I did bring some packets for each member of the City Council. It does further highlight what's already described in the city staff report. If I could hand it over to the appropriate city clerk. There are various opportunities to get involved. There, as was mentioned by the city manager, there are 8 different policy committees. Your city is represented on 2 of those, I believe. I would certainly like to meet with you. I am based locally here in Orange County. I can meet with you directly and provide you more information on those, how to get on those policy committees. Our division president makes direct appointments. Orange County representatives on each of those policy committees. That's one avenue. The packet also talks about the Mayors and Council Members Department, which is another great way to get involved. I do want to mention the City of Dana Point is one of 61 cities within a group in the League of Cities called the Coastal Cities Issues Group. This is a group that's being revamped. Our board of directors recently appointed the mayor of Santa Barbara, Helene Schneider, to be the chair of this group. The city manager of Pismo Beach is working a new work plan. Each of those 61 cities that are part of this group are able to participate in a webinar to actually develop this work plan. It'll be brought back to our board of directors and ratified, and it's going to happen quickly. So that's another way to get involved. There's various ways to get involved. Like I said, I'm more than happy to meet with you directly, come to Dana Point and further talk about it. I'm more than happy to answer any other questions.
Mr. Wyatt?
So if I understood correctly, you said that we're one of those 61 cities that's sort of in part of that group.
Yes.
The coastal cities. So as they're doing this, then there is some way for us to actually interact with that and help set that policy, correct? We just have to
that is
sort
correct.
out how to do that, or maybe we're already doing it, but I don't know. But I want to make sure we take advantage of that.
That is correct. I was informed by headquarters that each of the 61 cities are going to be communicated directly from headquarters. I was also told that the league is working directly with the Coastal Commission, and we just developed a new distribution list for each one of those 61 cities in this group. So the Coastal Commission directly is going to be issuing agendas and informational items to those groups. So your city staff will be a part of that distribution list. If you would like, or any member of the council would like to be on that distribution list directly, let me know and I will certainly make that happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course, my business card is in each one of your packets. I am locally, and you can. I encourage you to contact me directly. I am your staff.
Mr. Cardenas, one question for you, if I may.
Mr. Tomlinson?
How many classes, I think you guys have an annual event each year in a different city. How many educational seminars and classes do you guys approximately hold at those?
We have one annual conference statewide, but the Mayors and Council Members Department has two conferences throughout the year, one in January and one in June. So those are 2 classes from the department. In terms of all the other departments, they each have their own respective annual conferences. So I would say various workshops. That's at the statewide level. Locally, I manage the Orange County Division. We meet on a quarterly basis. We just had our last meeting, excuse me, this past Friday. So that's another avenue to get directly involved. If you can't make it to Sacramento or these statewide meetings, you can certainly attend our local general membership meetings. I have a distribution list for elected officials. If you're not getting my communications already, I'm more than happy to update or include anybody on that list.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I'm finished.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Miller?
Thanks for coming in, Tony. One of the things we do, I can talk about tax and rev because I sit on that committee. And the league comes together, and we get very involved in the statewide legislation, what's being presented up in Sacramento, how it's going to affect us locally, especially on taxation. That's a big issue for us. We have 4 meetings a year. And they last all day. And we talk about the impact and what we need to do and what we want the league to advocate for. And one of the things, Orange County, people know how I feel about taxation. I think we've been taxed enough. And we are always talking about the new taxes that are coming in. And one of the things we try to, Orange County, we're kind of a small part of this committee, but we have long conversations about it's time to stop increasing taxation and take a look at these programs and find out the ones that aren't very effective, revamp them, make them more effective, more cost effective, and use those monies somewhere else. So those are the types of conversations we have, who we're going to support, what legislation we're going to support, what we're going to oppose. And so it's a loud voice up in Sacramento. I mean, they have access to, I don't know, I don't walk the halls with them, but virtually every legislator up there. So this is a very important organization for us to be a part of. I'm very excited to be a part of it. I'm also the 5th District board member for Orange County. So we do a lot. I really wanted Tony to talk about the coastal cities, how we do have a seat there. And it brings the entire state together to talk about coastal issues that are very common among coastal cities. So thank you for coming in. I really appreciate what you're doing, and looking forward to our next meeting.
My
by
pleasure.
the way, I was at Friday night's meeting, and we had 2 senators and a state assemblyman there talking about, 2 Republicans and a Democrat, talking about what's going on in Sacramento and what we can expect to see into the future. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Vazorek?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tony, thanks for coming in. Thanks for your patience.
My pleasure.
I was hoping you'd give me a little more detail on the things the league offers to us as a city, specifically, I think, like webinars, things that we as council members and perhaps our staffers can take advantage of, and how we go about accessing that, and exactly give me some more detail on
Sure.
what you're offering us there.
We heard from our city members that we need to be more accessible because not everybody can travel to Sacramento, so we did start doing webinars. It's a way to participate electronically for elected officials and city staff to participate. We recently had one on medical marijuana and what cities are doing there in banning or permitting. Again, the league is about local control, so that's what we educate on. So you're right. We have various webinars on various different topics. We also have listservs where city staff can get involved, email questions to other cities and get immediate responses statewide. Again, we're a statewide organization. We represent 98% of the cities, in nearly every city. We're a large, diverse family, but our mission statement is the same, is to promote and protect local control. But we do offer opportunities to allow maximum participation, and webinars is just one of those apparatuses.
How do you decide on the topics for those webinars? Are we able to, for the issues that are of importance to us, bring those up? How do we go about getting the webinars on the issues that
Certainly.
are important?
A lot of the webinars are hosted by individual departments. So I believe the Public Safety Department had the medical marijuana webinar, but departments, our municipal departments usually give direction. Also, the city manager's department gives us direction as well, but I would say the ultimate body is our board of directors. It's a body of about 40 elected officials statewide that ultimately give us the marching orders on what webinars to provide to our members. Ultimately, we do try to get as much feedback from our members and see which issues are pertinent to their city, to their regions and cities.
And I think I understood you to say you're the person to contact when we if we have issues like that, we'd like to see addressed.
Yes, absolutely. Here locally in Orange County, yes, I am based here locally in Orange County.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I have a question on the 61 cities in the coastal subgroup.
Yes.
Where do they meet and when do they meet?
That is currently being formulated in the work plan. It's the 61 cities that are in the coastal commission zone. That's how they're decided. If you're in the zone, you're automatically a part of this group. That's the very work plan that's being developed by the mayor of Santa Barbara, Helene Schneider, and the city manager of Pismo Beach. But like I mentioned, that webinar, your city will be notified when that webinar will be taking place, so the city can participate directly in terms of topics to talk about, issues to address, perhaps webinars to host, and how often to meet.
Okay. And will they meeting in person, or do you anticipate basically webinar-based?
My experience is that they do meet in person. It is an in-person meeting that they do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to file the overview?
So moved. Seconded.
Vote? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, item 11, mid-fiscal year 2016-2017 budget status report. May I have a staff report, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, the recommended action is to receive and file the status report and to authorize budget amendments that are detailed within the report. I want to press back to the original adoption of this two-year budget that we're in. The original adoption was on June 2nd of 2015, and again, we're in the latter part of the second year of it now. Adjustments have been made to the current fiscal year budget, starting back in June when we were closing up last fiscal year and looking forward into the current year. We made some adjustments in June of 2016, and then coming forward in September, every year we have a major report we call the rollover report that takes a lot of programs and contracts that carried over from the prior year, and we do budget adjustments to move items from from fiscal year 16 into 17. The current amended budget shows a projected ending fund balance of $16.3 million for the general fund. The city's reserves remain fully funded in accordance with City Council policy. Current year revenues are tracking in total within 1% of that originally adopted budget that we put together 2 years ago. There are a variety of revenue adjustments that are proposed in this report. In aggregate, for the general fund, they amount to a $350,000 increase to the general fund revenue budget compared to the current $35.2 million annual budget. The current year expenses are tracking in line with expenditures with the exception of a few line items, including our attorney and litigation costs that we've spoken about on many occasions, for which adjustments are proposed at $360,000 and $300,000 respectively. Two other expenditure adjustments that are proposed. One is $40,000 addition to the city clerk's department for contracting out digitization of some of our microfiche records that we've been making steady progress on the last few years on scanning in all of our documents into our records management system that we bought a couple years ago. We would like to supersize that effort right now to get some of our building documents loaded in there. It'll certainly help staff and also the public when searching for items. Then the other one is $80,000 request to rehabilitate the women's restrooms in City Hall. You'll recall back in the fall, we brought forward an item, I believe it was in that rollover report, to redo both the men's and women's restrooms out here. I'm responding to constant input from our female staff and requests for us to do something with those restrooms. So we've downsized that original request to just do the two women's restrooms, and that is an $80,000 ask, and there's some details in the staff report as to the components of that requested project. Also, some projects included in last year's budgets For the community center are requested to be reappropriated this year. They weren't finished last year, so we would like to continue with those efforts. We're ready to move forward on them. So that concludes our report, and I'm here to answer questions.
Any questions of staff? Mr. Fazorg?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, in the question period, one quick clarification. I hope you can help me understand. I was looking at page 4 of the report. It's the second paragraph. It talks about notable revenue decreases, including the building plan check fees, $123,000, and reimbursed developer expenditure revenue. I mean, I think I generally understand what that means, but I looked a couple pages later on page 9, down at the bottom of the page, where it talks about building plan check, a $200,000 increase. I don't want to go. Are you there?
Yeah.
Page 9 at the bottom.
Yeah, you got it.
Is that, I mean, did we originally, it says $123,000 down, did we originally budget $323,000?
There's two different building fees, so let me
Okay.
just see if there's either a typo or reconciling the pages right now. Hang on. I typically include the account coding in those paragraphs, but I don't have that in there on this one. I think there was a typo in that paragraph on page 4, sir.
Okay, oh, so we're actually seeing an increase there?
It depends on the line item, so within building permits, there are increases and decreases. For that whole category, there's a $47,000 increase. And then when you look at charges for services related to buildings, yes, there's a $200,000 increase.
Okay. Because I had a similar question on the reimbursed developer expenditure revenue of $112,000.
That paragraph on page 4 is, I'm not sure what happened with that one.
Okay, so these numbers are the ones that we should be looking at on page 9.
Yeah, those are the ones that sum up. The details with all the count coding
Okay.
are the ones that sum up to the
So
requested.
it's the reimbursed developer expenditure revenue that we're seeing a decrease in, but building plan check fees, we're actually seeing an increase. Okay, I just wanted to clear that up. That was really the only question I had. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other questions, Ms.? We have two members of the public who wish to speak on this item. Mr. Steve Stewart first and Mr. Mark Zanitas.
Actually, if I could go back to that really quick, now that I'm looking at it, this was a year-to-date comparison on the paragraphs on page 4, and the items later are where we're actually asking for adjustments. So page 4 is just an update, where are we at year-to-date on those categories? It's not asking for an adjustment. On categories where we're actually asking for an adjustment, it's on that subsequent page. So they're two different things.
So
My
the two-
apologies.
I knew there would be an explanation. I was just.
You got me going there for a minute. I wasn't going to let it go.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Stewart?
My name is Steve Stewart. I'm a Dana Point resident. I realize there are all kinds of abstruse explanations for the information that's in this budget report, but as a resident, I can just look at the record here and see that expenditures from the original budget were $33,757,000, and now you're being asked to approve or agree to $36,593,000. That's roughly a $3 million increase. We're also going from a ending balance, what I interpret from these documents, an ending balance surplus of $365,000 to an ending balance deficit of $4,275,000. He's shaking his head, so my interpretation is essentially correct. My point would be, I was here a year ago when we went through this and we discussed what we were doing with the Stransgate situation. That was the situation where we had already invested $1.3 million in legal fees. We were paying a $300,000 fine, and we had more settlements and legal fees to look forward to, including I believe $300,000 that's in this budget for tonight. As a Dana Point resident, I'm aware of the fact that we've had a sequence of 7 years of deficits before we turned a surplus last year. We've blown coming up on $2 million on whatever went on with Stransgate, and we have $20 million invested in streets in the Lantern District that has no conceivable payback. There is no way to amortize that, taking into account the time value of money. I would just ask you as a Dana Point resident that rather than agreeing to raise the budget by $3 million, you think about what the outcome is going to be for us when we don't have TOT levels at where they're at now. If we have a recession or some other problem and TOT revenue drops. I'd just like to add one other point that's kind of tangential to that, but I have some statistics here from the Orange County of Orange on sheriff's costs. And Dana Point spends has a cost of $319 per capita for sheriff services in the city. That is the highest number by far of any other city. Mission Viejo is $174 per capita by comparison. We have a premium city here, apparently. I think we should ask you, I've been asking you, to figure out ways to spend a little bit less of our money.
Thank you.
If I could chime in on that, and if Mr. Stewart, if you want to keep page 3 open of the report. If you go across the top line item, and I'm not asking for a discussion, I just want to point some stuff out, and if you want to meet later, I'm more than open to do that. If you go along the top, you'll see that we had expected to start this year with $15.685 million in our fund to begin at the top line. We actually started with $20 million. A couple of reasons for that were some of the things we didn't get started last year that were anticipated in the last year budget. They weren't spent, so the city council reappropriated them this year. One of them would be, I believe, a little over $900,000 for our police services station build-out downstairs. In addition, there was a surplus last year, and I might have the number wrong, but in September, when we did our rollover report of this fiscal year, we carried over a surplus of $1.85 million from last year. And this year, the council appropriated, and they sent it over to the Capital Projects Fund to do capital projects. So that's part of that increase as well. So pretty much the majority of the increase in the expenditures that you're seeing here, one, were already approved by the City Council, but two, they were for those two items. One, the Police Services Center that was supposed to get started last year, and the other one was a surplus from last year that got transferred this year into our capital projects program. So.
Mr. Zanitas?
Thank you. So I understand that the purpose of a budget is to permit the council to weigh the priorities for the expenditures for the money that it expects to receive. What we have here now, late in the 2-year cycle, is a request to spend money that in many cases appears not to be necessary. Nice, but not necessary. Well, what we've seen with Mr. Vixoric and others questioning the apparent sort of confusion given by this particular item 11 budget report reflects why it's not a good idea to start changing budgets in the last few months, particularly where the items are not necessary. As the city manager indicated, they've been working on the microfiche conversion problem for some time. There's no reason why we add to the debt that we go over budget, which is what the proposal is, to spend money on something which has been an ongoing project. That is a budget item which should be contemplated, prioritized by the council, put in the budget, and left alone. The same thing with the bathroom. That bathroom hasn't, I'm going to guess, never seen it, but I'm guessing it hasn't changed much in the last few years. There have been a few complaints. There have been a few complaints that were important. This council would have heard about it from the staff. Now we get a last second, here, let's spend $80,000, which on its face looks pretty high to me, particularly watching what got spent on the sheriff's substation. So I don't think that it's appropriate at this late date in the budget cycle to start spending money that we don't have, bearing in mind that over the last 10 years, we went from an unallocated fund of something like $15 million, and it's now going to be reduced to $3.1 million. And I understand that includes the police palace, but nonetheless, it's real money being spent. The legal fees are, as I agree with Mr. Stewart, they're very disturbing. Everybody knows that Strandsgate was going to be a very, very expensive proposition to litigate. Everybody knew the litigation was coming. Everybody knew that Sanford Edwards is a tough and tenacious litigant, particularly when charged with fraud, and he's going to face a big problem if he loses. He's got to win. So instead of spending all the money on lawyers' fees, it seems to me that maybe we should start spending some money on settling the case. Secondly, there is no justification on this record for why the city attorney budget goes up by more than 50%. I request that this council direct the city manager to file a report with you and publish it, which you can publish, specifying the need and necessity of why this has gone over budget. Laguna Niguel's entire legal budget last year, per their budget, was $333,000. We're at $700,000, wanting another $360,000. That, it seems to me, is extraordinary. If there are good reasons, I'm sure that the city attorney and the city manager can write down and explain it and justify it. But otherwise, I would ask this council not to approve this particular expenditure tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zanitas. Any other public comments?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, closing that portion. Okay, so the recommended action is that the City Council receive and file the fiscal 2016-2017 budget status report and authorize the budget amendments detailed within this report. Is there a motion on this?
Madam Mayor, I have a few more questions in light of the public testimony that we've heard. May I explore those?
Mr. Tomlinson?
Mr. Killebrew, you're very intimate with the budget. Can you maybe explain why we are looking at a $360,000 increase for city attorney budget? There must be something that you prepared this budget correctly with your staff?
Yes, I did. This projection to finish the fiscal year, but just during the year, some of the items that have come up, we've had, I'm looking at a sheet here. Our city prosecutor efforts are higher than typical, if you will. We've had some cases that we're moving forward on. We've also had code enforcement issues that aren't typical of what we would run into in the past, where we've had to go into court and take some extraordinary steps to get some properties cleaned up. I think you saw code enforcement update back in January, and some of the pictures from that. Going through that, we did have the Strands local coastal program amendment processing. We've had sober living homes that we've kick-started this year that wasn't, I would say, wasn't anticipated to start the prosecution steps that we've been taking there. We had it was an election year. We had a couple ballot measures. There was court actions back and forth where the city had to be represented. We had a referendum where there was extra legal work done. So there's a variety of items. Some of them are reimbursable, but that's where we're at. I mean, as we've had the discussion in the past, a lot of the effort is out of our control, where we're responding to complaints or claims. Some of it's within the staff's control with what requests we put to the city attorney for clarification and opinions on things, and some of it's within the city council's purview, certainly when it comes to litigation matters. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but it's a whole host of items that you can't necessarily predict in any given year.
Now, what impact did the city manager transition have for us in legal fees, as well as I know that we've had some staff changes and we've had some new city council members. What was the impact of city attorney fees on those particular items?
There were city attorney costs incurred for the transition, if we will, for the city manager's retirement in lieu of termination. I don't have the number of hours that were invested in that, and certainly closed sessions and other items and legal work that had to be done, but there was an investment there made by the city as well.
Okay, thank you. No further questions at this time.
I have a couple questions. Okay, you mentioned that the city attorney spent time on ballot measures that were not anticipated. Is that what I heard?
Not in the original two-year budget that was established.
Do you know how much money was
I
spent
do not
on that?
have that in front of me, the details on that.
And this $360,000 increase, so that we still have $177,000 in the attorney budget, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so are we looking now at the million plus being more of an anomaly for this particular year? Or do you see this as this is going to kind of be the normative from here on out that we should be budgeting for?
I guess I'm going to be looking to the council to tell me what's normative, because a lot of this, the city council gets to weigh in on what we have the city attorney working on. So it's matter specific, if you will.
Well, I guess I'm just trying to get at, do you anticipate in the next budget that 700,000 is not?
I would hope not, but again, we've got some items coming up here that I mean, sober living homes are still an issue as we find those that appear to be operating outside of the law. We've been directed to date to address those. We've got medical marijuana coming up, and I can't tell you what other issues come up. I mean, even just recently, we're tearing down a hotel right now. That took an investment to get the legal work done on that. So.
Okay, and then on the risk management, I noticed in the original budget and the updated budget, nothing was budgeted for that. Could you just
Typically, the city does not budget for litigation. We don't go into the year expecting to have to litigate. With the two-year budget 2 years ago, we weren't anticipating to have litigation. We obviously have had litigation, and it's resulted in additional work and even outside contracts with third-party attorneys, both for the settlement action for the Coastal Commission claim, but also with the Headlands action. We're paying outside attorneys to defend and assist the city.
So it's our policy not to budget any money for litigation?
The city has not anticipated litigation in its budget, so just the way it's always been done.
Well, weren't we in the Headlands litigation 2 years ago?
We were on a reimbursable basis, yes. So that was literally as the bills were being incurred, we were getting reimbursed. There were budget adjustments for revenue and expenditures, and there was a zero hit to the bottom line.
Okay. So the 300,000 increase in litigation, is that Headlands?
Yes.
I have another question. On page 4, it says the notable revenue, I'm reading the second paragraph, the notable revenue decreases include building plan check fees, down $123,000.
Those were year-over-year comparisons. So compared to where we were at with actual revenues collected a year ago to this year, there was a decrease. What you have to understand also is when we put the budget together for building, planning, building, and engineering fees, we can't anticipate that we're going to have historic highs in permits being, and plans and permits being pulled, plans submitted, permits being pulled. So our revenue budgets each year have been fairly low, and we've adjusted them up as the revenue shows up.
Mm-hmm.
So compared to last year, which was a historic high on those particular ones, they might be down. They could be up compared to our budget we put together 2 years ago. So difference between budget versus actual this year and actual versus actual compared to the prior year, we're still at historic highs. We're still above our overall budget for the most part. We may be behind last year a little bit in some categories, but we're still at historic highs in planning, building, and engineering activity.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, this building plan check fees, are those the fees associated with the engineering professionals consulting contracts that we've engaged, or is that, are those
We
doing
do have
different work?
contracts in place for senior planners that might be processing some of this activity
Okay.
for the plan check fees. And we've also got, separately, we've got contracts for building inspectors and so forth to augment our staff to handle the high-level activity we have in the actual building, as opposed to just plan checks.
So we don't have outside plan checkers?
We do.
We do?
Yes.
Okay. So is this revenue down 123? Do we take that into account in our?
We match off the reimbursed, so if somebody comes in with a development and we'll get, let's say it's a large development like a major project in town center, we're going to get deposits. We will likely hire an outside consulting firm for some of the more complex things and unique things that are coming through. We do match off and we reimburse ourselves from those deposits for actual costs incurred.
And have we looked at, do our reimbursements actually reimburse us for the actual cost expended?
In a lot of cases, no. Our fees in a lot of cases have not been changed in 18 years.
And is that something that you might bring to council to?
We have
remedy?
a completed fee study that we've been working on that I'm prepared, and that was actually one of the items I was going to suggest to the Finance Review Committee when we next meet, when they're talking about what should we look at. That was one of the items I was going to suggest they look at.
Okay. And any other suggestions you might be bringing to the city council regarding, I know we've had discussions about business license, that sort of thing. Is that something at some point we'd be prepared to talk about, discuss?
I'm willing to talk about anything that the council wants to talk about. So that is not on my list of things to bring forward, but if the council wants to talk about business licenses or anything else, that's why we're here. Just give us direction.
Okay. Lastly, I just wanted, on that same thing, developer expenditure revenue down 112,000. What is that and why is that down?
That's reimbursed developer expenditure revenue. It's the same thing. We get deposits up front from developers to process plans or projects. So year over year, actual revenue is down. It could be a timing issue, or it could be an indication of a slowdown in what's coming through our development pipeline. I wouldn't go there, though, because I see other activity in other places. It's likely a timing issue where we might have had a large project submit during the first half of last fiscal year, like maybe some of the stuff from the Zephyr project came through. I don't have it in front of me on what projects came through. It could have been some of the houses, some of the plans or projects for the houses next to the Monarch Beach Resort. Usually it's a big slug of activity that comes through, and so the year over year is down, but we're still, like I said, we're at historic levels, if you will, for activity.
And is that information that can be included in a future, budget requests for an amendment so that we can see, whether it's just a timing issue or?
We do track the flow of the number of, it's interesting, Mayor Pro Tem Wyatt, actually, him and I had this conversation about building activity.
Okay.
Where you can look at the number of permits that come through, but on some of the revenues that we have, the calculation for the fees charged includes a valuation from construction tables provided by the state. So you can't just look at the number of widgets that are coming through and say activities up or down, because a building permit can come through that's really simple. And we can have for a bathroom remodel, we could have a building permit come through for a major renovation of a restaurant and a hotel. And they both could be one widget, but the values and the revenues derived from them are obviously going to be different because the level of effort that goes into reviewing plans and inspecting construction can vary widely. So we could likely pull together some metrics that try and explain what's happened during that quarter, but I think it'd be more project specific. If there's a major variation, we'd be saying the South Cove project, 3 buildings worth of plans were submitted and it generated a revenue in that time period that occurred last year and not this year. So we could probably do some of that if it helps to better inform you. I'm not sure that it will be useful as a predictor, though.
Well, it might not be useful as a predictor, but when I'm being asked to, increase a budget, it's helpful to know, okay, is this down and we should take that into account for expenditures, or is it down because, okay, we have a timing issue, which is a very different position than, no, our revenues are just down, and, that would possibly make a different decision on my part. So that's why I ask. And also, I'm very grateful to the Financial Review Committee, because these are the kind of issues that I will need assistance with to figure out.
And honestly, I hope they can help me too, because predicting this stuff is horseshoes and hand grenades. You're just trying to get close.
Yes, I get that. But, I'm a lawyer, not a financial person, so this will be helpful to me. I'm trying to understand it myself. Mr. Wyatt?
So I've spent way too many hours looking through these, as other people have talked to me know. So starting a few months ago, I'd asked Mr. Killebrew for the actual detailed billings on our city attorney, because I was trying to get a handle on why the money was, why the run rate we could see was, because it already was predictable we were going to pass $1 million in this fiscal year. It's a bit it's a bit hard to go through a couple hundred pages for each month's billing to try to get the detail, but there's a lot of stuff, right? And it's my concern then ongoing is that it's not there may be a few anomalies in there, but it's not huge. It's not there's not a $500,000 or $600,000 anomaly in there that I could see. Generally, there were lots of there are lots of tasks to be done that dealt with permits, that dealt with ordinances. There's just when you look at the list of staff requests to check something, right? It's pretty high. The downside of not having the attorney look at it, my worry on the other side is that then we could end up in some litigation because we didn't do something, that we should have done. So there's always that balance I'm trying to sort through. So as we go into, I guess, my overall action, first of all, if you took the $660,000 that we're being asked to recognize that between litigation and city attorney are adjusted in the budget, we would look pretty good in terms of our 2 years ago versus now. But realistically, that money that we're being asked in those cases, for all practical purposes, has already been spent. So all we're trying to do is not stop spending, mid-year and say, okay, we can't check any of that stuff that we do anymore. My bigger issue, and concern is, as we look at going into the budget coming up for the next 2 years, if the run rate really is, $1 million instead of 700, we need to either change something or we need to, move something, because it's a lot of money. If there's a better way to do it, I'd be the first one to try to go dig down and figure out what it is. But whatever it is, it's concerning that we have there. Unfortunately, I don't think we can do a whole lot at this point in terms of deciding to unspend that money and have some left. So we're going to have to deal with it. But it's a heads up that we can't go into the next budget year without going back and digging a little deeper. I think that's really the message that we need to bring in here. There's one thing that that has come up to everybody that I've talked to, and I looked about the budget, Mr. Killebrew, that maybe we could do. So there's when we look at on page 3 of your report, from the original budget to the current amended budget, we go from a $365,000 positive to a 3.84 negative, right? And so that's one of those questions that immediately whacks you up beside the head and say what's going on. On the other hand, there's all of that information in that column is actually positive. It's actually a plus to the city, in that we carried another $4.5 million over from the previous year into this budget, and then we carried some expenses over that offset, and then we moved because of the 4.5, we moved some money into the CIP, about $2.8 million that we were able to move out of the fund and into CIP to have to spend on a capital improvement. But the column looks negative, looks bad, but even though it actually has mostly all good news in it. And now we're adjusting off of that slightly. I think we need to, just an idea of finding a better way to break those carry forwards and how they were carried forward and dealt with, so that they don't look like the budget got a big hit of $4 million, when in fact we carried more than $4 million forward, and we moved some out into other funds for some of our construction work. So it took me I dug through a lot of documents to trace all that money back, and I'd prefer to make it easier for everybody to trace that money back. So we're going to end the year, if we make the adjustments you've asked for, despite the $660,000 more, about $150,000 less in our total bank, if you will, than what we projected. So I would prefer not to be $150,000 down from what we projected, but out of the total thing, it wasn't a lot. I guess my overall take is, as I looked through the overall thing, and my normal thing, I want to account for every penny because, well, that's just who I am, I suppose. But the bigger issues are, one, how do we make it really clear as to how the money moves so that we don't confuse a lot of issues, and then we really should get focused on the issues that really are important for us, because we sort of get sidetracked by issues that actually aren't issues. So I'd like to recommend that we maybe could work on a format that would help with that, if that is an idea. So anyway, and then the other things, I sort of took, I sort of appreciate the fact that when we're going to adjust some money down and we're going to spend a little more anticipated, I could virtually offset that number that we're down by deciding not to fix the restrooms or do the microfiche. I would just push it into next year's budget, and then I'd have to sort it out then, because these are projects that need to get done. They're not going to go away. The city won't actually be as responsive to getting public requests out unless we can finish the microfiche work, and it'll reduce the effort of the city staff and the clerk's office to do that. It's a good thing to do. We all want the stuff online so we can go back and find it. And the restrooms, I got a tour today. It wasn't very, it wasn't very attractive. So we'll have to go in and do some major repairs, or we got to retrofit them. I have one question about that. We got a bid from the company that's doing the police services substation work to include the restrooms at the time. that they, as part of that bid, we carved it out at Councilman Miller's request because we were gulping at the $1 million thing. This sort of, are we better off in terms of what it will cost to get this work done, to tag it on the tail end of the substation work that they're doing now for this construction company? And is that bid relatively firm that we have from them to do this? I mean, I'm just looking to find out in terms of timing if I can, you know, add it back into their work now that we're sort of where we are. Do I likely save some city effort and money in doing that?
I can do my best to answer that question. 2 months ago, I specifically asked our contractor if we were to change our position on the restroom project, would they honor their originally quoted price as a change order? And they agreed to that.
Okay.
So now I did not ask that question in the terms of can we break that up into smaller quantities by doing half the restrooms, for example.
Yeah.
So the original estimate we received was for all 4 restrooms, 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs. And they agreed to honor that price. I believe because they are still under contract with us, that they would still honor that price.
Yeah, the crews are here. I guess this is what I would like to, you know, other council members maybe to look at. And so the bid process itself to go out and get a separate bid, you know, is time consuming and add some staff.
And that would definitely
move
change
forward.
the
It
number.
might be the time. I mean, I know that it's $80,000 we don't have, but it's, like I said, if my concern was that I could decide not to spend it indefinitely, I might do that. But I went in there today and I decided that really wasn't an option. So it's only a question about when, I think. So anyway, it seems like it might be worth us just, you know, sort of taking the gulp and saying, okay, we're going to, you know, now might be the right time to do this work. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that comment up. Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson?
Yeah, you know, we proclaim ourselves as a 5-star city, but our restrooms are about half a star. And when you come here to do business, or as a matter of fact, our employees, city employees and staff that have to use those restrooms on a daily basis. And I'm not too sure that they're, maybe Mr. Rose can answer this. Are they ADA compliant at this point? They are, and Mark can help me weigh in too. They are what I would consider existing non-conforming. There are some changes that need to be made, very slight. They are, for the most part, ADA compliant, yes, but they are 28 years old. Okay, so it might, you know, there's a couple other things to look at, not only the cost of happiness and wellness of our city staff as opposed to ADA lawsuits as well. So for me, that's something that's necessary. And just to avoid any risk management issues, and the proper way to answer your question would be yes, for all intents and purposes, they are ADA compliant in terms of sizing, doorways and things like that. But there are some minor modifications if we were to redo it that would bring them more current. Okay, thank you.
I do have a question on this $80,000 for the bathrooms. We're doing that because we're doing all this other work at the same time. Is that correct?
The bathrooms, I'm requesting that they be done because they need to be done. And every time I walk up and down the stairs over here and there's a female employee, they like to try and drag me into the bathroom to show me how bad they are.
Okay. How confident are you that the $80,000 is $80,000?
I'm confident that Mike Rose will get the bathrooms refurbished for $80,000. If he has to come in, if he has to come in on weekends and do some of the work himself, it'll get done for $80,000.
Okay, and, okay. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to comment on this, and I've been sitting back here listening because I was the one that actually pulled it off. The other contractor requested that it be pulled off. Where did the $80,000 number come from if you're not taking it from the original contract?
Based on the request from Mr. Killebrew to come up with a number for just the women's restrooms. The original number, as you know, was for all 4 men's and women's, 2 up, 2 down. Based on the request to come up with a number for just the women's restrooms, I went back to the original bid that was given by our contractor, and
made some modifications to that based on my experience, and said, did some gut check, and I don't believe that we could get that work done for 50% of the cost, because if we were to go through the bid process again and start over, essentially. So I took 50%, and then I criticized the numbers a little bit and rounded up to 80%. So I have not been out to bid on this project. I did not want to be out in front and premature. If there was not going to be any funding, I wasn't going to expend the effort to do the bid process. There are ways that we can cost engineer, if you will, out, or be more fiscally responsible as we're doing that process in terms of fixtures and the way things are selected. And so if I'm given a budget for it, we're not going to go over that budget. But essentially that number came from taking the original number and then trying to estimate what it's going to cost to do half the project.
Okay, so we basically took it off the original project, so basing on the fact that they said if we added it back in, they would do it as long as they're here, correct? I mean, if they had to come back.
And again, to qualify that, they agreed that they would honor that original number if we were to ask them to do that entire project.
Right.
I did not consult with them what their bid would be if they were to do just two.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Okay, so that's, I guess, the point I was trying to ask before. We use this contractor at this time because they bid those restrooms at the same time they bid these other projects. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Okay, well, my understanding was that we're doing these at this time from this contractor because they're here anyway, and it was going to be,
The
they had
request,
given us a bid.
if I can try and answer that, the request that's in the mid-year budget adjustment is a request for a lump sum of money to do the work that does not specify or a specific contractor or an award of contract at this time. It's a request for a transfer of money to seek to accomplish that project.
And we got this $80,000 because this particular
We came to that
contractor-
amount based on the original bid for $174,000 and change, I believe it was, to do all four.
Okay, so we haven't actually gotten more than one bid on this?
Correct.
This is an estimate
Yes.
for getting the work done.
I
This is not this is not authorization. We're not presenting a contract with you to do the work. We're asking for the money for us to go forth and find a contractor where we'll get quotes to get the work done. So this is just asking for budget authority.
Okay, so when you go out and ask, so I
If we're going to add it back to the contract the council already approved for the police services station, I'm going to have to take a look at that contract because I might have to bring that contract back to amend it if the spending authority I'm asking for to add $80,000 isn't within the contingency already provided, and assuming we're not spending some of the contingency. So I thought all we're asking for tonight is the $80,000 budget, and I can send out an email to all the staff tomorrow to say the council's there for you, and we're going to get the bathrooms done for you.
Okay, and so at this point, we're not approving a particular contract, a particular contractor, anything more than this is the amount we're going to set aside for that work. It may or may not be that much.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Vazorek?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I basically, just to follow up on this, $80,000, I think everybody's saying sounds like a lot for a bathroom. Oh, for two bathrooms. Now, obviously, this is the public's building, and we need to have first-rate facilities, and we need to do that. And so at this point, you're estimating that it's $80,000, and I know you've split up your estimate into the various portions of how you arrive at that $80,000, but that that may shift dramatically, or you're hoping that it'll be less. This is just the outside figure that you're trying to make sure you have the authority to get this done.
Correct.
Okay.
Those individual numbers that bring us to the 80,000 number may shift internally, but 80,000 encompasses what
But you were trying to
maximum
break
amount
this
I
down
expect it
for
to
us
cost.
to say this is where you got your $80,000.
Yes.
And for example, this is sort of the thing I almost expect the Financial Review Committee to look into. If we're spending, say, $25,000 on tile, they'd say, is that, $600 hammer or not? So do we feel comfortable with the Financial Review Committee and their watchdog role taking a look at these numbers?
I would certainly feel comfortable with that audit occurring after actual bids have been received. I feel better about that rather than auditing my estimates leading to a project estimate.
Sure, and that would be a good role for them to play after the bids go out, after we see what the contracts is going to be and if the money's being spent.
And if the council
Wasted
feels
or
that
not.
is justified in the authorization of a contract.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions, Ms.? No? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the amended action. Recommended action, I'm sorry.
Second? Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Did I hear anybody? Okay. So the motion on the floor is to receive and file the fiscal year 2016-27 budget status report and authorize budget amendments detailed within that report. It's seconded, so let's vote. Okay, the motion carries 5-0. Move on to item 12. Emergency demolition and abatement of the Dana Point Harbor Inn located at 25325 Dana Point Harbor Drive. Do I have a staff report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, before you is a request to ratify a contract that I executed associated with an emergency hazard abatement order for the substandard dangerous building that was issued for the Dana Point Harbor Inn property off of Harbor Drive near the corner of PCH across from Doheny State Beach. Pursuant to the Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings, the building official did order the immediate demolition of the building. It's taking place right now. The property owner will be required to reimburse the city for the cost of this abatement. The high-end cost estimate is included in the staff report and in the contract of $162,985.73. And with that, I'm available to answer questions.
And I understand that that is going to be reimbursed by the owner of the hotel, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and what assurance do we have a contract? How is that memorialized?
First of all, under the law, they're required to reimburse us. We put a lien on the property to ensure that we're reimbursed. But in this particular instance, we've actually been working with the property owner and their attorneys who have given us some written assurances that they're agreeing in advance to reimburse.
Okay. Did you say we can put a lien or we have put a lien?
I believe we've already recorded a notice of pendency on the property, but when we're all done with these things, we file a lien for the actual costs that are incurred. We won't need to file a lien if they reimburse us right away, but in the normal course, we would put a lien on the property.
And when do we expect to be reimbursed?
Ursula, do you have any insight on that? My guesstimate is, within 30 days based on the conversations that Ursula's had, but I don't know if you've got any other insight on that.
No, they've just indicated that they don't want to lien on the property, and so I think if they are not paying within a reasonable amount of time, we threaten to lien the property and we'll get the check, but I don't even think we're going to have to do that.
Okay, and then just to walk us through, if there's a lien on the property, can we foreclose on the lien, or do we just have to sit there and wait till they do something with the property to collect on this lien?
Well, we'd have a number of different options if that were the case. I mean, you know, again, we don't expect that to be an issue here, but
Right.
in the normal course, you can't get financing on the property if there's a lien on it. We could do a judicial or non-judicial foreclosure on the lien if we wanted to.
Yeah.
When you look at these types of issues, it really depends a lot on how much money is at stake, what the value of the property is, what other obligations might be on the property. Strategically, on a number as large as what we're looking at here, what we would do is convert it to a tax lien. There's a whole process you go through to do that, but the advantage of doing that is that you get priority over bank loans, mortgages. So, you know, with the kind of money we're talking about here, that's what we would do if there was any sort of an issue.
Okay. Oh, has the owner of the property indicated what they want to do with this property?
I'm aware that there's been some discussions. They also own the property directly across the street, the former Dana Villa site. It's fairly clear that they're hoping to develop a hotel at the site. Combined, the overall property is the former Dana Villa site that's on the other side of Harbor Drive, the site where the hotel currently is. There used to be a little liquor store in the corner, and then the Jack in the Box site. They own all of those properties already. Whether they're looking to consolidate some additional properties or not, yeah, I don't know, but I know they're evaluating a project, a hotel type of a project in, you know, those general, on those, rather, I should say, general parcels.
And is it zoned for something, I assume it's zoned for a hotel. Is it zoned for anything else, or is a hotel basically?
It's part of the Dana Point specific plan, and the allowed uses are hotel, hostel. There are some other uses that are not as preferred, but are allowed. It's not, I was just shown recent language that I actually need to investigate that whether there's extra process that you need to go through on those other options. So I haven't had a chance to check up on that language yet, but it was the owner who brought that language to my attention as they are still investigating the various options that they have with the property.
Do you know offhand what the other options are, that it's, the other uses that are permitted?
Restaurant, retail, those come to mind. There's some like trails, there's some other sort of recreational uses.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So the action, recommended action is that the city council ratify the contract associated with the execution of the emergency hazard abatement order for the substandard dangerous building issued for the Dana Point Harbor Inn property located at 25325 Dana Point Harbor Drive in Dana Point. Do I have a motion?
Yes, you do, Madam Mayor. I'll do that.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay. Okay, the motion passes 5-0. Next item, item 13, establish mayor office hours at City Hall. Do I have a staff comment request?
Could I ask you to give the staff report?
Yes. Okay, I've had several, thank you, several people, actually quite a few people, say that they would like to be able to talk to members of the city council. And do we have office hours? I think Ms. Maynard has come up several times and made that suggestion. So I will make myself available to people who want to come and talk. What I'd like to do is have a space in City Hall to do that. And basically, is it possible to have somebody that members can call and set a scheduled time so that, we kind of have people coming in back to back versus me just sitting there for a couple hours? And if that's not possible, then I will make other arrangements.
You're asking if we have staff that can coordinate for you and I guess that would be a direction of the council. If you want us to have staff available to coordinate calendars, we can
Okay.
certainly work to do that, so.
Okay. Do I have any comments, questions, anything on that? Okay, then I'm going to make a motion that we direct staff to have someone available for members of the public to call and schedule appointments for meeting with mayor and any other city council members that want to establish office hours. I will give the times that I would want to be available and have a place in the city to meet people. Have a second?
Madam Mayor, don't forget, there's a public comment.
Oh, I did forget, thank you. Okay, Ms. Maynard. Hi.
Okay, I'm happy to see that we'll be having city council office hours, and it'll better connect our elected officials with the residents and with city staff. I have a couple of comments that they should be scheduled on any day but Friday, because in the past, they were scheduled for Friday, and people are usually beginning weekend plans, particularly in a community like this. And I'm asking this, but I know this would involve staff time, and after listening to conversation, I don't know that it would work, but it would be important that if there's a particular issue that someone is discussing with the elected official, that there be some sort of written response to that person, within a certain time limit. Because, and this, I love you guys, okay? But at city council meetings, politely, residents are told, thank you for your comments. They're told very politely. And not often is anything ever followed up. So it would be nice to get a response so residents know that they are actually being heard. Because I'm a perfect example, and there have been many others over my 21 years. They say the same thing to the council, and the council says, thank you, and that's it. I call it going to the black hole, but, council comments, but that's it. That's all I have to say. And I'd like to know when the decision is made, how we're notified, what day, if there's a particular day that is selected by the different council people. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say that I have an email, and we all have emails, and anybody who emails me, I respond. So if you want to talk to me, I don't speak for anybody else, but I've never gotten one from you. But if you want to email and you want a response, I have an email, and I do respond. Well, I have never received them. And yes, we will notify you of when the office hours are. Did I have a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, shall we vote? Motion carries 5-0. We direct staff to appoint a staff member that I can coordinate with so that that person can schedule my office hours and office hours of anybody, any other council member who wants to have office hours and a place, and we will get word out to the public of when and where. Any other public comments?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any other staff reports? Mr. Killebrew?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Munoz, any staff report?
I have nothing this evening.
Okay, council reports. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to report on a meeting I was at Friday night with the League of Cities. One of the issues that we spoke about is SB 54 from De Leon. He's the Speaker Pro Tem. SB 54 is proposing that California become a sanctuary state. Okay. The league is recommending opposition. I happen to agree with them on this. Not so much that we think local governments shouldn't be able to do what they want. They should, but they shouldn't force that onto local agencies that choose not to follow that. The state of California receives about $100 billion in federal funding. President Trump's made it very clear sanctuary cities and sanctuary states could lose that funding. And I just don't think it's appropriate that Sacramento, well, of the $100 billion, 85% of it goes to local government. So I don't really think it's appropriate that the state should reach in and start messing with our federal fund dollars. If we want to choose to be a sanctuary city, that's up to us. We should be able to do that, but not have it mandated by the state. So I think we need to pay very close attention to what's going on in Sacramento right now, and track these bills very closely, and if need be, send our letters, talk to our assemblymen and senators, and make sure that we let them know that we're opposed to some of this stuff. So that's what I'd like to report, and I'll turn in my list of meetings to the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wyatt.
I don't have anything to report. I've turned my list of meetings into the city clerk.
Well, I have nothing to report. I will be turning in my list of meetings. Mr. Vizorek?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have nothing to report.
Mr. Tomlinson?
I will turn in my list of meetings to the clerk, but I wanted to comment. I had an opportunity to attend the Wales Festival Parade this past weekend, and what a wonderful event. I saw a lot of people on the parade route and a lot of children, and that made me very happy. I think everybody had a great time out there, so I want to thank all those involved in putting this spectacular event on. A huge, huge thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there being no further business, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Then we are adjourned.